Committee. And with that, we're going to elect a chair and vice chair, and then I will hand the meeting over to the chair. So that's sort of how the order that we're going to proceed in, if that's okay with everyone.
I'm sorry, Mayor. We're ready now.
Oh, excellent. Okay. So I believe we have everybody. So I would like to call to order a City Council special meeting and the Citizens Budget Committee meeting to follow. It's Monday, May 17th, 2021. We're meeting virtually again via WebEx due to COVID-19 restrictions of meeting in person. The first thing I'm going to do is ask for, I'm going to take the roll, and I'm actually going to take the roll of everybody on the call at the moment. So if you could just say present when I call your name, that would be helpful. My name is Jules Walters, and I'm the mayor. Next, I'm just going to go right down the list. So I have Kathy Molesky next, our city recorder.
Present.
We have Citizen Budget Committee member Abby Farber. Oh, I didn't hear you, Abby. Are you present? I can't. You're still muted. Sometimes if you have Zoom open and WebEx open, the microphone won't work. I've done that before.
This.
Oh, there you are. Thank you.
Present. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Abby. Next, we have Citizen Budget Committee member Ann Frazier.
Present.
Nice to see you. We have Council President Bill Relier.
Present.
Councilor Rory Bielostowski.
Present.
Citizen Budget Committee member Ed Schwartz.
Present.
We have we have Human Resources Director Alyssa Preston.
Present.
City Manager Jerry Gabrielatos.
Present.
From our Finance Department, we have Josh Cam.
Present.
We have from Public Works, Lance Calvert.
Present.
Finance Director Lauren Breithaupt.
Present.
Councilor Mary Baumgardner.
Present.
Citizen Budget Committee member Perrin Linn.
Present.
Acting Chief Peter Mahuna live from Maui.
Present.
Okay, we have our IT Director Shane Boyle.
Present.
Citizen Budget Committee member Sheila Waldron.
Present.
And City Councilor Todd Jones.
Present.
Excellent. I think I got everybody on there. If I did not, just wave to me. So our first order of business in this special meeting is to approve the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
Yes, good evening, Mayor Walters and members of the council and the Budget Committee. I move to approve the agenda for the Monday, May 17th, 2021 City Council special meeting and Citizen Budget Committee meeting as posted.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded to approve the City Council special meeting and Citizens Budget Committee meeting agendas as written. Kathy, can you take the roll for us, please?
Yeah, Mary, did you want me to call both citizen budgets and the council for this
Why
first
don't
or just council?
Why don't we do the both right now?
Okay.
Kathy, do we have to add the IT department in there?
Yeah, IT was left off the agenda, and so they were going to be after the human resources. I sent an email to the committee.
Okay.
Earlier
I
today.
didn't know if we had to like approve the change or anything.
Well, so if it's part of the budget meeting work session, we don't have to officially vote on it, but we can amend the motion to include the IT department report. Is that how you would say it, Lauren?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, that's fine. So okay, so at this point, Kathy, we go back. Do I ask somebody to amend it, or should we just let this vote die and then we do a new motion with an amendment? Or do we amend our original motion? Bill?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Walters. So I move to table the former motion to approve the agenda and move on to the table a new motion. And I'd look for a second for that.
I'll second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda of the City Council special meeting and Citizens Budget Committee meeting with the addition of a report for the IT department. Does that sound correct to everyone? Is there any discussion? Okay, then Kathy, will you call the roll, please?
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Abby Farber,
Yes.
Counselor Bielostowski,
Yes.
her and Lynn,
Yes.
Counselor Baumgartner,
Yes.
Counselor Ann Frazier,
Yes.
Council President Relier. Councilor Relier, did you say yes?
Yeah, that was a yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Sheila Waldron,
Yes.
Ed Schwartz,
Yes.
Mayor Walters.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And so now our next agenda item is Agenda Bill 2021-05-17-01, wood chips removal contract approval. And I'm assuming I will turn this over to Jerry or Lance to walk us through either one.
Sure, Mayor, Council, and Budget Committee. We released an RFP for wood chip removal, and a couple of bids were received. I will turn it over to Lance to speak on that and maybe a bit of an update on how we're moving forward on this.
Sure. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and tonight's meeting, the Budget Committee. Our goal was to move ahead with the council award of the wood chip debris removal and a contract. If everybody recalls, February 12th or 15th, we had an ice storm that damaged the city. Emergency was declared. The city immediately mobilized and hired multiple contractors to assist in removal of debris from the city right away. The city's public works facilities are not capable of handling that volume of debris, so those debris volumes were stored temporarily and still to this day sit at Mary S. Young Park, as we also have material stored at Wilderness Park. This contract before you tonight was to dispose of basically haul away and dispose of the wood chips that have been previously shredded and chipped. We would have needed another contract to remove all of the material that has not been shredded or chipped to date. We have not shredded everything to date because we do not have enough storage space for that operation. We need to move out the chips that we currently have in storage so we can continue to operate and move out more of the debris material. Following Clackamas County's recommendation, we went out to solicit contracts for a general contractor to do all of that collection removal and following FEMA contract language guidelines that we have to follow to get reimbursed for FEMA. The ice storm was declared a disaster, so certain activities that the city conducts that meet FEMA's contract requirements and approval are eligible for reimbursement. Wood chip removal is one of those things that is eligible for up to 75% reimbursement. The city still has to pay for a minimum of 25% of those costs. In accordance with the bids, we went out and advertised in all of our normal venues and fashion. We received 2 bids. The lowest bid was $640,000. The other bid was over $1 million. Our estimates for that debris removal was actually closer to $160,000. So the bids were exceedingly higher than our estimates. We've feel like there are better ways to remove that material. We also think that there's a lot of competition right now and lack of interest in this kind of work in the contractor world right now. So we're looking at alternative means to remove of those materials. For tonight's meeting, we have the formal bid. We have the bids on the table for council review. Staff is recommending that due to the high cost of the removals and the cost relative to our cost estimates, that the staff recommendation is to have the council move to reject all the bids that were submitted and direct staff to find alternative means for cost-effective removal. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or concerns that the council may have in this particular item.
Thank you, Lance. Do any members of the council have a question or comment for Lance? And I've got a very long list, so I'm trying to scroll through everybody. I'm not seeing any hands right now. But just go, if you want to ask a question, you can unmute. Otherwise, I would just say, first of all, Lance, thank you very much for all of the incredible work you and your department and Parks and Rec have been doing to help clear that debris. I know it's really urgent to the public that that debris now gets removed, so I appreciate how swiftly you've been working to try and get that done, and also being very cognizant of how high that estimate is. And so, you know, I just appreciate all the work you're doing. So thank you very much. Does anybody else have a comment? I am not seeing any, so I would accept a motion on this. I don't know if you have it written down, Council President.
Mayor Walters, I do not. And perhaps if we could take a look at what it is briefly that Director Calvert reported to us. I heard a couple of things. One, he felt that the cost for the proposals that he received was too high, and two, that they were going to go back out for bid on this. So I'd like to know what it is at this point that the Director Calvert is asking us to do on this.
Sure. So the first thing, to following our purchasing rules and policies, anything of this magnitude has to go before the city council, and it's up to the council to award or reject those bids. In this case, because of the high cost estimate, staff recommendation and a potential motion would be to reject all the submitted bids for the wood chip debris removal contract, and then direct staff to research alternative means for cost-effective debris removal. We have been working with ODOT and the county to identify other alternatives, as well as in contact with some local vendors, and we will continue to work in that regard to find more cost-effective means of either utilizing the material or removing the material.
All right, thank you for that, Director Calvert. Mayor Walters and members of the council, I move that we direct staff to reject the bids and look for alternative solutions that allow debris removal to be considered in a more equitable and cost-effective manner.
I second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded to reject the contracts and direct staff for cost-effective alternatives. Is that, can you give me your exact wording, Councilor Rallier?
It was for alternate solutions in a more cost-effective manner.
Alternate solutions and a more cost-effective manner. Is there any discussion? I'm not seeing any hands up, so with that, I will ask Kathy to call the roll.
Counselor Bielostowski,
Yes.
Counselor Baumgartner,
Yes.
Council President Relier,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Mayor Walters.
Yes, thank you very much. So the motion passes. Lance, I would just like to again say thank you. And if, do you need any more direction from us this evening?
Not, thank you. No, not tonight. I think this clears up this item so we can continue to work and move forward. Hopefully we'll have a future work session or some time to give you all an update on where we're currently at in response to all this, as well as other things that I know people have been asking about. So again, more to come, and we will continue to march along and do what we can.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're adjourned from our special meeting. And so now I'll call to order the Citizens Budget Committee meeting. We took the roll during the special meeting, and so everybody from that roll call is still present. The first thing I wanted to discuss is we have 9 people on the call today to give public comment. So there's some concern that if we give each person the full 5 minutes, it will take up our first hour of this important work we need to do. So I wanted to get consensus amongst the Budget Committee and Council if they are comfortable reducing that to 3 minutes per speaker. And I think the best way to do that would be if anybody does not think it should be reduced to 3 minutes, please raise your hand, either physically or electronically. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. If I missed you and you do have your hand up, please feel free to shout out. Oh yes, Todd Jones. Do you have, so you would not be interested in reducing it to 3 minutes? You would prefer to stay at 5?
Thank you, Mayor. May I speak?
You may.
All I would ask is if this is the first time that people are hearing this, then out of respect for them, if they prepared assuming they have 5 minutes, I want to honor that. If this is not the first time they've heard that, that's fine. But I think we could simply say it would be our goal that they could do it within 3 if possible. But if they came prepared assuming it's 5, I don't want to suddenly surprise them and say you have 2 fewer minutes than you thought you had.
Okay, that's fine with me. Is everybody else comfortable with that? Okay, that sounds good. All right, so the next order of business is public comment. So I will turn it over to Kathy to introduce people. Just if you're here to give public comment tonight, just please state your name and your city of residence. And as you heard from our conversation we just had, you have 5 minutes. If you can squeeze it into less time, it would be appreciated due to our crowded agenda. So I will turn it over to Kathy to call forward the first person with public comment.
Mayor Walters, the election of budget chair and vice chair is actually the next thing that happens.
Oh, okay, let's go ahead and do that first. I'm sorry, let's go ahead and do that first. So yes, let's elect the budget committee chair and vice chair, and then I will turn the meeting over to the chair. So does anybody have any nominations for committee chair of the budget, chair of the budget committee? I see Ann Fraser's hand is up.
Yes, I would like to nominate Abby Farber if she is willing to stand.
Okay. Abby, is that something that you would you accept that nomination?
I'm very flattered by that and appreciate it. As this is my first year on the committee, I would prefer to be the vice chair and step in as needed.
Okay. And would you prefer to change that to nominate Abby for vice chair?
Yes, I'd be prepared to nominate Abby for vice chair.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any more nominations for chair? I am not seeing any hands up, so You can nominate yourself as well if you feel comfortable doing that. Council President.
Yeah, so are we merely asking the budget committee members from the public, or also the budget committee members from council for that role, or to ask for nominations?
That's an excellent question, and Finance Director Lauren Breithoff put her hand up, so I'm hoping that she has the answer.
It has to be one of the citizen members to be the chair and vice chair. So it's not a counselor or the mayor.
Can the council nominate somebody, or only the budget committee can nominate?
I think it would be fine. I don't see any reason why I think it would be fine for the council to nominate someone.
Okay.
All right. So then I would like to nominate Ed Schwartz as the president.
Okay. And Mr. Schwartz, are you comfortable accepting that nomination?
I'm rather busy, but yeah, in order to move things along, I'm happy to accept that. I think I appreciate Councilor Aurelia's nomination. Yes.
So do we have any more nominations? Right now we have a nomination for Mr. Schwartz as chair and Ms. Abby Farber for vice chair. Do we have any additional nominations? I am not seeing any hands up. So let's go ahead and do a quick consensus vote for first for Ed Schwartz to be the chair of the Citizen Budget Committee. So give a thumbs up if you approve. And I'm seeing lots of thumbs, so that looks good. And so great, thank you, Mr. Schwartz, for stepping up. And next we have the vote for Ms. Abby Farber as vice chair of the Citizens Budget Committee. So thumbs up if you're comfortable with that. So I'm seeing lots of thumbs. So thank you very much. We now have a chair and a vice chair. And with that, I will turn the meeting over to Mr. Schwartz to go ahead and continue the meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Walters, and welcome everybody. So let's move right along to the public comment. And for that, we'll turn it over to Kathy Molesky to call the names. Thank you.
Rita Crawford, can you hear us?
Yes, but this was not the reason why I was here tonight. So I think I need to reschedule.
Okay.
Because you don't have me on your list, do you? To talk.
Yeah, I do have you on the list. It's the Citizen Council budget meeting.
Yes, but this is not what I was here for. I was told just to sign up for any meeting that I could make myself available, and I have a different subject to talk about than this. So I'm going to excuse myself.
Okay.
Thank you.
Drew Hansen, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so just I'll get into it here. So thank you all for giving me some time today as you enter into budget discussions. What I'm here to talk about is the importance of the city of West Linn hiring a full-time economic development director. So as the chair of the Economic Development Committee and a resident of the city with young children, I am invested in seeing our town thrive in the short and the long term. So briefly, I'll touch on the benefits of economic development and why hiring a economic development director should be a top priority for the city and for this committee to be considering. So at its heart, economic development is about building healthy economies in order to have healthy communities. And through an increased tax base, additional revenue provided by economic development supports, maintains, and improves local infrastructure. Economic development also provides better wages, benefits, and opportunities for local career advancement. And businesses feel appreciated by the community and in turn are more likely to stay in town, contributing to the economy. It also helps with economic diversification. So a diversified economic base helps expand the local economy and reduces a community's economic vulnerabilities. And a stronger economic base means public services are less dependent on intergovernmental influences and alliances, which can change with each election. And also, property used for its highest and best use maximizes the value of that property. And we all know property and new places to build in West Linn are increasingly rare and at a premium. And more local tax dollars and jobs raise the economic tide for the entire community, including the overall standard of living for residents. So successful economic development often occurs when locally produced goods are also consumed in local market and to a greater degree. So those are a lot of great benefits of economic development. And West Linn now more than ever needs a dedicated person focused on strengthening our local economy and diversifying the city's tax base. We need a specialized individual recruiting new businesses, retaining existing ones, and assisting businesses to expand operations locally. West Linn needs to prioritize and hire an economic development manager. And lastly, most cities near West Linn, from Oregon City to Happy Valley to Tigard, have either a full-time dedicated economic development manager or director already on staff. And I think it's time West Linn caught up with our neighbors for our own economic longevity. Thank you, and those are my comments.
Shatreen Craig, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me here this evening, Mayor Walters and council members. My name is Shatreen Craig. I'm the executive director of the West Linn Chamber of Commerce, and I do live in West Linn. And I was also calling to talk about the position for the full-time business support specialist or economic development director. I also wanted to talk about the support of the chamber through the city's economic development, and then just kind of recap our successes this year and challenges for this business community. I have appreciated hearing Todd Jones talk about this possible position for this new economic development business specialist. And it would be so amazing to have that full-time position and to support this community and this economic development. But I would say it is going to be critical that this person complement our existing business partners, which are the Chamber and Historic Willamette Main Street, particularly now that during the state of emergency and then moving towards recovery. You know, we've got some budget, we're all looking at our budget issues. We all know that there's some ARPA funding coming and different things like that. And so through us, the suggestion would be to utilize our already established connections with local businesses to work together to purposefully connect and grow our businesses and economic community in West Linn now and through this recovery. I have been speaking with several cities and different chambers, and their cities have utilized chambers, and you've got the Historic Willamette in ways that through business contracts and MOUs to help build up their economic base, their business growth, through equitability, everything like that, to come together and support each other. And I would love to see that happen in our city. We have an amazing new council, an amazing new mayor, and I just see such growth and wonderful possibilities even after this very, very hard year we've faced. I know for us as a chamber, because of the hardships for income, our percentage of members were down 30%. So, you know, this kind of thing trickles across for everywhere. So my hours, even though income went down, my hours far exceeded my part-time position. When I'm pulling in 40 to 60 hours just to help businesses, it's hard, but it's worth it. So as you're considering this position, yes, I would love to see a full-time position sometime, but I'd also love to see a partnership, strong, wonderful partnership between the Chamber and Historic Willamette come together to support everybody in the community. We thank you, and we just thank you because we all get to be we want to be the voice of the small businesses in our community through advocacy, growth, and being equitable. So I hope to come alongside you guys and support you however we can. And I just thank you for this time.
Christian Linder, can you hear us?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name's Christian, and thanks for taking the time to listen to public comments. My public comment was about the SDC fund for bike and pedestrian summary. So I'm looking at the PDF on page 98, and I'm seeing a pretty concerning trend in the funding for pedestrian and bike infrastructure. So in 2018, it was at $600,000 yearly, and now it's projected to go down to about 60,000 in 2023. And you know, when we build cities, we really need to think about the most vulnerable people. So people with disabilities, people that might not drive cars, and there's places where the sidewalk just ends. There's places if you bike, you're merging with traffic, and it's really dangerous. And I'm also looking at some of the goals that the council wrote. So one is to support a sustainable and healthy environment for all. So the number one bullet point was to improve public and multimodal transportation in West Linn in coordination with the Transportation Advisory Board. And I think that's a great goal, but I don't think we're going to get that if we cut the budget for this by it's less than 10% really is what it is. And there's real concern with the infrastructure currently. And with the city growing, we're not giving people options outside of living in a car to get from A to B. So thanks for the comment.
Rebecca Hollenbeck.
Hi. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and Budget Committee for allowing me to speak tonight. My name is Rebecca Hollenbeck, and I am the Executive Director of Historic Willamette Main Street. I am speaking on behalf of 2 points this evening, and I'll try to be as brief as possible to keep this moving along for you guys. The first of these points is to give you more background about our organization and to encourage you to continue funding for our organization as is included in the proposed budget before you. I have put together an activity report explaining more about our organization and its 4-point approach to revitalization, what we do, the activities we've been working on over the past year, some of our program highlights, and some of the direct impacts we've had on the business community we support. The past year has been one of the most challenging years in regards to businesses that have been seen in quite a while. It's definitely been an up and down journey for a lot of them. Our organization has been there to support them during these times and has done our best to help support our business owners pivot their operations as best we can to help them stay afloat. At the onset of COVID regulations allowing businesses to reopen, we made open for business and open for appointment signs for the businesses so that they could let the public know what was going on with them at the moment. During the winter months, when our restaurants and bars couldn't have indoor dining, there were a number of locations that were looking hard at whether or not they could keep their doors open past the end of the year. By partnering with the city to use CARES Act funding, we were able to purchase canopies, heaters, tables, and chairs. All of that made a huge impact for those businesses. And for one owner in particular, it was the key to staying in business. We would have lost an over 12-year restaurant on our street if it hadn't been for that. Last summer saw constantly changing regulations in regards to our summer market, but through it all we were able to stay open. We were able to extend the market an extra month and only had to close down during the smoky days when the fires were in the vicinity. Having an outdoor market that people could access in the community had a huge impact for many, especially for those worried about staying outdoors and not going inside to do their shopping. We greatly appreciate the city's ongoing financial support of our Main Street organization over the last few years. This year, we've had a lot of changes and we've been reviewing our organization. We've been working to right-size our programming and therefore our budget based on this information. We took into account the size of our city, the number of businesses located in our boundary area, and the budget/staffing of other Oregon Main Street organizations. Based on this information, we've created a right-sized program and budget that will match the program size for our community. We are asking you to consider increasing the amount of our grant award listed in the proposed budget from $20,000 to $32,140. This would cover half of the cost of our executive director's salary, which would be increased to be closer in line with other program salaries, and would additionally cover the cost of the rent for our organization's office. Please read through the information I provided about our program and feel free to reach out to me with any questions that I can answer about our program. The second point I wanted to speak about tonight was a request from Councillor Jones on behalf of a city staff position for economic development. I want to echo everything Drew said earlier in his statement. He did a great job outlining the benefits of this position. I think the business community of West Linn would greatly appreciate a dedicated person to work on these matters. While current staff works very hard on economic development items, they are limited with the amount of time that they can dedicate to them. I know there are budgetary concerns going into this budget cycle, but I would like to give our support to considering that position be added. We look forward to our continued partnership with the city as we move forward, and thank you very much for your time tonight.
Shanine Redkin Manning, can you hear us?
Yes,
Okay,
I can hear you.
thank
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor, City Council, and the Budget Committee for sharing your time with me tonight. I know it's valuable, and I'll try to walk that fine line between keeping it short and bringing you useful information. More in-depth information is available in that handout that Rebecca Hollenbeck just talked to you about, and it was distributed to you. So my name is Shanine Redkin Manning, and I am the Secretary for Historic Willamette Main Street. And I'd like to present to you information about Historic Willamette Main Street and how we would like to be your partner of choice for important community and economic development. I'd like to provide you proof of our value and to illustrate how we continue to help lead recovery. I will share with you the history of our impact with our community, share with you some personal testimonies of local business people, and reiterate our ask for you, of you for this budget session. We have a vision for the future. We have a plan with strategies that coincide nicely with the city's plan. So Historic Willamette Main Street has run the summer market for over a decade. And last year we averaged 32 vendors a week. And you all know that the market does more than just create business opportunities for those individual vendors, but draws consumers, tourists, and their dollars into West Linn. This year, we already have about 60 vendors committed to the summer market, and we have expanded down Willamette Falls Drive and are partnering with local business owners. We look forward to another year of creating a space for families and friends to create lasting memories and traditions. Historic Willamette Main Street worked with the city on the initial design of the transportation project, which became the upgraded Willamette Falls Drive streetscape. Our focus was on adding usable sidewalk space, designing better street lighting, and ensuring better and safer crosswalks. We also worked towards conveying a positive visual message about our business district and all the great things that West Linn has to offer. So now I would like to read to you a couple of personal messages of thanks that Historic Willamette Main Street has recently received. These are from local business owners. And the first one is from Doug Nelson, and you all know him as the owner of 1933 Tap Room. Doug wrote, Rebecca's work ethic, desire to help, and care she has shown since the beginning of the pandemic has been admirable. Through all of the changes due to the ongoing construction project, as well as coronavirus, she has stood with the community and has been a liaison between the business community and the city. She is a tireless advocate for the businesses and citizens of Willamette, a plethora of information, and always trying to do what's best in the interest of the community. The second testimonial is from the great folks at Sushi Bomb, and they wrote this. Thank you for helping us apply for grants to keep our business open. Without your help, we would not be able to get financial assistance. We don't speak English well, and we have a hard time understanding some of the information. The COVID crisis has made owning a small business difficult, and adding the issue of trying to navigate the system in your non-native language has been daunting for some of our ethnically diverse small business owners. Historic Willamette Main Street wants to continue to help these local businesses be an important part of our community. Finally, I would like to respectfully reiterate our ask. We'd like our grant to be increased to $32,000, and I think it's $124 that Rebecca added, per year to fund half of our executive director's salary and for our home office rent. And we would like to be considered for $25,000 per year from the ARPA funding to help cover operational costs and allow us the flexibility to tackle some of our more complex plans. Thank you all for your time and thoughtful consideration of this matter.
Jody Carson.
Good evening. I'm Jody Carson. I live here in West Linn. Thank you, Mayor, City Councilors, and members of the Budget Committee for taking the time to hear citizen comment tonight. I am representing the Willamette Falls and Landings National Heritage Area Coalition. I'm currently the treasurer of that organization and have been a member for many years. I would like to thank you for your ongoing support and your support that's indicated in the budget proposal for the Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area Coalition. Your support as a supporting partner is crucial in us moving forward with our vision of creating a national heritage area. You are one of the supporting partners along with Oregon City, Lake Oswego, Wilsonville, Metro, Clackamas County Tourism, and PGE, some of our other supporting partners. And currently, the mayor, Walters, is our representative from West Linn on our coalition board of directors. This last year has been obviously challenging since many of the events that we've been able to do we've not been able to continue with due to the COVID restrictions. However, we have still worked on trying to move forward the National Heritage Area. We got our management plan for the State Heritage Area designation. We have already been designated as a State Heritage Area, and the requirement this year was to submit a management plan to the state, which was accepted and approved. And our National Heritage Area designation requires congressional approval, so we've been working with our congressional delegation. We have also been working closely with the city in the discussions around creating a cultural and heritage center in the historic City Hall. We want to continue partnering with West Linn as we move forward because we see the West Linn area around the falls, the locks, the waterfront, some of our other historic sites in West Linn as a central and key part of the National Heritage Area. So thank you again for your ongoing support. And if you have any questions, I will stay and attend your meeting. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. Thanks again.
That is all for public comment.
Thank you, Kathy. Does anybody have any questions for any of the public commenters? Seeing none, I want to thank everybody for your comments. Appreciate your input. Appreciate your brevity. So thank you very much. So we'll move on to presentation of City Manager's budget message. So Mr. City Manager.
I think I saw Councilor Jones waving his hand.
I'm sorry, I missed that. Councilor Jones?
My apologies. I was saying thank you to the public.
Okay, very well. All right. Mr. City Manager, it's all yours.
Sure. Good evening, Mayor and Council and Budget Committee members. Want to talk about the budget that we'll be reviewing over the next couple of weeks. As I wrote in the budget message, this has been a year of emergencies. My first email to all of our staff was about the air quality index. Not an ideal start, but we have undergone some other emergencies since then, including the ice storm, which Lance spoke about earlier today. And as you can tell from what Lance said, we're still dealing with. So each one of those emergencies that we have dealt with has been not only a immediate response from staff that has been required, but also months of work that are in its wake that we have had to pursue and complete and are still in the process of completing. So with that in mind, I proposed a budget that added 5 positions, or maybe brought back in some fashion some positions, the first of which is an emergency manager. I thought with the year that we had, this would be a prudent move to not only help us get through those emergencies, but also deal with the recovery that, as you can tell, we are still working through. I also thought the contracted position with the city of Lake Oswego was a smart move, adding a position within the police department that will help us respond to calls that are along the lines of responding to behavioral health issues, drug addiction, things of that nature. And then third, a GIS specialist which will help us bring our asset management software up to current levels. As we were putting goals together, and hopefully as the budget committee has had a chance to review, a lot of the goals that the council is seeking to accomplish this year are related to transportation and infrastructure. And that GIS specialist has a backlog of work to do, as well as work in the future that will help us reach those goals that the council has outlined. Fourth, a citizen engagement coordinator. During the time that I have been here, I would estimate that our citizen engagement staff, that is to say Dylan Digby and Elisa Schroyer, have spent a fair amount of time responding to inquiries from the Public Works Department, or relating to Public Works, including the wildfires, the response to the ice storm. On Main Street itself, since we just talked about Main Street, there were many inquiries about parking and the work that was going on there. And I think that adding this position will help us with be able to outreach to constituencies that are going to be affected by the transportation and infrastructure work that we are looking to accomplish over the next 2 years. Finally, a parks maintenance worker. As I mentioned to everybody individually, the amount of developed acreage that the parks maintenance or the parks department is responsible for has increased from 2005, which was 15 acres, to 23.3 acres. This position would be funded by an 88-cent increase per household per month. The increase would be in the park maintenance fund. Finally, we are in a bit of a transition and some unknowns. Over the past year, the city was fortunate enough to receive funding from the federal government for CARES, through the CARES Act, which helped us stay afloat as it did many other municipalities throughout the country. And as I've talked about, the city's been lucky enough to be scheduled to receive $5.4 million to help with some specific uses that have been outlined in an interim final rule that was 144 pages from the federal government that just came out, I think last week. But we've had a chance to review summaries as well as the actual rule itself. I think our deputy city manager's done that. And I see three uses. One, helping the business community. Second, improving our water and sewer infrastructure, and then third, revenue replacement. There's also funding in this budget for continuing the DEI work that the council would like us to pursue. We just received the draft of the audit report that was completed by the Kenley Group. It outlines some next steps that we could take, including hiring a staffer, but we have allocated in this budget only about $40,000, so that won't be something that the amount of money that we've allocated is not sufficient to hire that staffer, but it was suggested that we could take a project management approach to this work, and we have a staff that's excited about completing that next phase of work. Also want to outline that the emergency manager might be able to help us with a couple other functions that are critical to moving the city forward. One, assisting with risk management, and second, potentially working on items related to sustainability. The chair of the SAB presented at the last council meeting requesting a position that was dedicated to sustainability, but my hope is that this emergency manager could take on some of that work as well. This budget is one that we will talk about has a gap in, I'm sorry, a deficit of 2.3 million in the next biennium in our reserves. And we have talked as staff and then individual conversations with you about the structural problem that creates that deficit. And that is our tax rate is locked at $2.02. And so for the next couple of years, and in fact, I joked with Lauren on July 1st, we need to start identifying other sources of revenue that can be pursued, and also look at ways that we can continue to save every penny we can. Finally, this budget, as somebody who's come from a couple of other states to review and present, is one that's a little bit complicated. And one of the discussions I've had with our finance director is about merging these 5 funds that we have into one general fund. I think that will help be more transparent and help members of the public navigate the budget. It will also help our staff save time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director for anything that should also be included at the top.
Thank you, Jerry. That really did do a great summary of this budget document. There are not a lot of significant changes in this budget outside of that, outside of those items. As I mentioned to all of you in the last few weeks, this was one of the more challenging budgets to put together. We've had a lot of ups and downs over the last 2 years, and a lot of changes, a lot of things that are hard to project. And it is very hard looking forward, knowing what our financial situation is going to look like. As Jerry mentioned, we do have in our 5-year forecast a deficit in reserves in the next biennium. So not at the end of this biennium. We're fortunate that we were able to balance this biennium and meet all of our reserve requirements. With that being said, we are not meeting them by a significant amount. As Jerry mentioned, there are 5 funds that we consider the general funds of the city. Those are the actual general fund, public safety, library, parks and rec, and planning. All of those funds receive general fund revenues of the city. They're allocated property taxes and franchise fees, other general revenues, state revenue sharing, liquor tax, cigarette tax. Those are the general revenues that come into the city, and they're all allocated. We have talked at length about combining those other funds into the general fund to make it more transparent. It would have more detail in each line item, and we wouldn't have to figure out exactly how much property tax to allocate to each fund, and exactly which revenues to allocate to each fund, and the transfers in and out of the general fund would be a lot simpler. With that being said, we have $5.4 million that we are about to receive, and we just recently got some more detailed guidelines about that. But when this budget was being put together, we didn't really have a clear understanding of what that revenue was going to be spent on. So what we did was we included that revenue in the general fund revenue. And then we have 2 expenditures, one for the first year of the biennium and one for the second year of the biennium, one for $4 million and one for $1.4 million in the non-departmental fund. I am very hopeful that those expenditures will go to cover that funding will go to cover some other expenses that are already in the budget elsewhere. So we won't actually see that full $5.4 million coming out of non-departmental. Instead, it hopefully will go to things like covering a portion of the emergency manager in the city manager's department. That in effect will help us at the bottom line for the next biennium, and hopefully reduce that $2.3 million deficit that we're seeing in reserves for the next biennium. So I am very hopeful that that deficit will look a lot better this time 2 years from now, but we still need to be very thoughtful about adding any new expenses, and how we are going to add revenues and how we are going to reduce expenses. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of extra in reserves the actual general fund is balanced with an $11,000 over reserve amounts for this biennium. So we met reserve requirements, but we're only at $11,000 over those. With that being said, some of the other general funds have a little bit more, like parks and police, but none of those 5 general funds have a significant amount over the reserves. So tonight and Wednesday and next Monday, when we're discussing adding any items to the budget, we need to be thinking about those reserve numbers. If we are going to be adding anything to the budget that doesn't have a corresponding revenue or a reduction in another expense, we need to be able to figure out how we're going to fund that. There's not a lot of wiggle room. So I will leave it at that. I think each department has great presentations on what their department is spending their funds on. And so we'll go through those tonight. And then on Wednesday night, we'll talk more about the Parks and Public Works Department in the CIP plans, and also any other questions on personnel and assumptions that we used in setting our personnel expenses. I see a question from Councillor Jones. I don't know if that's for me.
Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Lauren, Jerry said that you're looking at potentially 5 funds that will be kind of recombined into the general fund. I just want to make sure I know which ones. Can you tell us which ones you want to leave standing alone and which ones you potentially want to move into the general fund?
Right. So it's actually 4 funds combining into the general fund to make one fund. So it's all 5 of them. So the general fund will be the main fund. And then the ones that we're thinking about putting into the general fund are the Public Safety Fund, the Library Fund, the Parks and Rec Fund, and the Planning Fund. Those are all funds that receive general revenues. Most other cities in our state, if not all, have those included within the general fund. And we will continue to keep the Building Fund, Streets Fund, Water Fund, Environmental Services, SDC, City Facilities, and debts, the Bond Fund and Debt Service outside of the general fund. those all have restricted revenues that are specific to those funds.
All right.
And that won't happen, to be clear, that won't happen until next biennium. Our goal is, as a finance department, to start working on it in the middle of the biennium, because it is quite an undertaking for our department and the whole city changing their, or a lot of departments in the city changing their general ledger accounts. So it will be a multi-month project before next budget cycle.
All right, Councillor Aurelia.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Ms. Brineup, Mr. Gabrielotto's mentioned the need for an emergency manager. In the last budget cycle, we had considered that under the police department budget, and the police chief at the time indicated he was more interested in having another police officer on the force rather than an emergency manager. Do we currently have an opening in the police department where we're considering using that position for the emergency manager, or what funding source are we talking about for a emergency manager?
So that's kind of a 2-part question there. In the city manager's department, we had held open the deputy city recorder position last biennium. It was not filled, with the idea that it was going to be filled this biennium. We are not filling that position this biennium, and instead are adding an emergency operations coordinator. So those 2 positions, although they're not a wash salary range wise, they're fairly close. And so that would be the budget that we're using for the emergency operations coordinator. In the police department, you might remember last biennium, we also held open 1 police officer position. We are also not filling that position. Instead, we are using the funding
to fund the behavioral health specialist, which falls under materials and services because it will be a contract outside the city with the city of Lake Oswego. So there's 2 positions that we're not filling. And then there are, and then we're filling we're adding an emergency operations person and a behavioral health specialist part-time.
Great. Thank you for that clarification.
Do any members have any other questions for Mr. Gabrielato? Yes, Councilor Bialostowski.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question for Lauren on the process here. So we go through the budget presentations of the different departments, and then is there a time for deliberation, or when is the time when changes can potentially be made if there are any? I just didn't know since it's my first budget.
Absolutely, great question. So as I envisioned it, I think that each department director will go through their individual, and after we'll have a question and answer with that individual department director. I'll keep track of any changes throughout the process. If there's something that the council decides during that time, we can vote, or the budget committee, I'm sorry, determines at that time that we wanted to add or, remove some funding from that area. We can do that at that point. Or we can wait until the very end after the CIP is presented and talk about all the changes that we would like to make in the budget. I think it's up to the budget committee as a whole on how you want to do that, but I envisioned after each department that there would be questions related to that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point? Seeing none, we will move on to the budget presentations. First up is City Council and City Administration.
Thank you, Chair. So I will walk us through the City Council's budget. There's council stipends and the stipends benefits. There are personnel related expenses, and this includes the membership dues and meals. It also includes, memberships to things like the Oregon Mayor Associations, the Clackamas County Business Alliance, the West Side Economic Alliance, and the Metro Mayors Consortium. There is a line item for professional and technical services. That funding is used for the special election. It's anticipated that we will have a water rate increase that we included in this biennium. Facilitation. So for instance, the last goal setting facilitation that the council we conducted, and just, I see folks with their heads down. I'm on page 36. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. There is also budget for transcription service. And then finally for DEI, there was funding for that under professional and technical services. In community outreach, there's funding for surveys. I believe this is something that council had, or the line, this is the line item that we use for that sort of outreach. The contract lobbyist is split between the city council's budget and the city manager's budget. And then there is funding for travel and training when we begin to do that again. My understanding that in the past, council members have attended conferences in Bend or nationally. That is the council budget. Yes, Abby. All right.
Thank you, City Manager. My question, and I know this has been a hot topic over the years we've been here in West Linn, is the budget for city attorney services. Have we looked to see how that compares with other cities? Are we way over? Are we under? Are we about the same as comparable cities our size for this amount?
Lauren, do you know what we've done in the past as it relates to city managers or city attorneys?
I don't know if we've ever done a like a comparable study to other cities and related to city attorney. We may have, but I don't remember specifically doing that. But that would definitely be something good to look at.
I don't know how the other members feel. I think it's an interesting number given as, I mean, you know, it's just the largest because this is where it has been placed. I'm really more interested in the rate of the number. You know, if this is what we have to pay to get legal services and what other cities pay, it's appropriate. I just, you know, right now I'm operating a position of I don't know either if this is comparable.
All right. Yes, Ann Fraser.
I'd like to echo, in fact, I was going to ask what Abby just asked, because I have some real concerns about the cost here. I know that the hourly rate for our city attorney is well over $300 an hour. And the city attorney is involved in many, many meetings each year for the city council and probably for other entities as well. So it seems to me that a budget of $1 million almost for the biennium is a big chunk that should be looked at seriously to see if there are other ways to reduce that cost, but still to get the kinds of counsel that one needs to run the city. But I do feel like this has gone up a lot, and that it should be looked at rather seriously in the next year. Thank you.
Thank you. I see some hands up. I don't know who was first, so I'll just go with Councilor Reyes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. In response to that comment, I throw on the table that during the previous budget cycle, the law firm of Jordan Ramus did provide a cost comparison to other cities of comparable sizes. So we do have that information available. There was nothing irregular or outstanding about their costs. And in fact, in most instances, their costs were below those of comparable institutions.
All right, thank you. Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I'm glad I'm sitting at home instead of in City Council because I can grab all my old binders from the past years. So I'm going to read real quickly how much we spent for city attorney services in past bienniums. I'll do this quickly. So fiscal year 2012, city attorney services was $199,000. Fiscal year 2013, it was $180,000. Fiscal year 2014, it was $80,000, 80. Fiscal year 2015, it was $73,000. 2016, it was $105,000. 2017, it was $139,000. You're seeing a pattern here so far, yes? So far, it's in the upper 5-digit to low to mid 100 to 150,000 up until 2017. 2018 was 176,000. 2019, depending on which binder I look at, was 210 or 235,000. So in 2018 and 2019, we hopped from low 100 to 150 to 175 to 235 range, but we're still well below 250. In 2020, it goes to 426, about double what it was the year before. In 2021, it goes to 492. Those are 100,000. And then we're budgeting in the 490 range, but presumably we're budgeting that based on the current biennium's experience. We're certainly not budgeting that based on the bienniums prior to that, because the bienniums prior to this one were significantly lower.
All right, Mayor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I do appreciate what Councilor Jones just shared, and I appreciate both Abby and Ann for bringing this to our attention. A couple things happen when that big jump takes place in 2018. That's when we discontinued having the services of an attorney in-house, as well as having a city attorney for the city council. And that also coincides with rate increases by Jordan Remus year over year. So yes, we are over $300 an hour for Jordan Remus's services. And I know that we have, as part of our council goals, to look at legal services and make some serious, have some serious discussions about how we need to be saving money in this area. Thank you.
All right, Councilor Bialystowski, pardon me.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to state that I appreciate the questions, and I have had some, back when the Jordan Remus firm prepared these numbers for the council, I just had some concerns about the way in which they presented them, in that I felt that the law firm should not be presenting the cost comparison to the city. I think that should be done independently by staff or someone else. So I'd like to see another cost comparison done independently of the law firm, just to make sure that there's no, fudging of the numbers or any sort of displaying it in a manner that's not transparent, or I wouldn't say it wasn't transparent, but just in an independent comparison is something I'd like to see of the cost from different firms. But I also had a question on a different topic. Sorry to change the subject, but I was just wondering about our transcription services that Jerry mentioned, I think. I was wondering if our staff is still using the transcription services for our minutes, or if there's any opportunity for cost savings there, because I know that the minutes for last council were at times long because our meetings were long, but we've done a better job of keeping the meetings shorter. So thank you. I don't know if Kathy can answer that, or maybe Jerry.
Yes, Jerry.
It's my understanding that we haven't recently used the transcription services. I can't tell the most recent time that we have. Kathy, if you're able to, can you jump in?
We have been using them just for the council meetings only.
Councilor Bialystowski, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I just wonder if there's any opportunity, does staff think we still need to be budgeting for our transcription services at this time, or is it something we can change with our minutes policy to allow staff to do it if it's feasible to save money there?
I think we can explore that.
Very good. Councilor Baumgartner?
Thank you, Chair. I just had also a kind of a interest in this subject of legal services. And as far as the numbers that Councilor Jones was providing to us, I guess it would be helpful for me to see how those correspond with the costs that were happening with the inside or the staff attorney services as well, because it doesn't really represent the whole picture if we're just hearing the Jordan Remus figures, or are they included in that legal services line item you were talking about, Councilor Jones? Or anybody can answer that, Lauren.
No, they're not. They were budgeted. The in-house assistant city attorney was budgeted for in the city manager department under personnel. I believe the cost of the in-house city attorney ranged in those years, obviously increasing as time went on, but towards the end, we were looking about in between 150 and 180 a year in cost.
Okay. Well, I guess maybe if we're going to discuss this further, I'd be interested to see side by side, year and year over year and how they compare, because I don't know what those figures really are otherwise. I also had a question about the transcription, actually. Thank you for bringing that up, Councilor Bialystowski. Isn't it true that the requirement for minutes has been clarified to not needing to be recording every single word, and that it's more a summary? Wouldn't that be shorter and less expensive to record, or to transcribe?
Kathy, are you able to answer this?
Yes, of course, action minutes are faster than verbatim minutes. Ann Fraser has her hand up, though.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I saw Councilor Jones first, and then we'll have Ann Fraser. Councilor Jones?
Thank you, Chair. Mayor, I appreciate the point you made, which raised a question in my head. Alyssa or Lauren or someone can tell us, what was the last year that we funded an in-house attorney? Which fiscal year?
If you give me 2 seconds, I can figure that out, or if Alyssa, if you know the answer to that.
Yeah, knowing that would help us in this comparison of numbers as they've changed.
I do recall the last biennium that the council and committee asked, I believe the assistant city attorney was already gone. And so the council and the committee asked for the funds to be removed from the city manager's department and moved into the city council's budget, but the FTE remained, which now has been removed because it's never been filled. So everything that was budgeted for the city in-house city attorney and the council city attorney all were lumped into one in the last biennium. So that would have been 1920.
Well, I want to make sure that I understood your response correctly. We'd like to know the last fiscal year, not the last biennium, the last fiscal year, because our comparisons are by fiscal year, that we had a separate line item for an in-house attorney. And if we don't know off the top of our head, that's fine, but it would be good to have that answer. If we can
I have that information now. It looks like the position was terminated officially in January of 2019, but there was very, very little work done actually in fiscal year 19. The position was really ended in May of 2018, so fiscal year 18. There was just some finalizing of a few projects in fiscal year 19. So really it was fiscal year 18 was the last year.
I just want to note then, thank you for saying that in fiscal year 2018, the city attorney services under city council was 176. And so it jumped 60,000 to 2019, but then it jumped almost 200,000 from 19 to 20. So losing the in-house attorney does not explain the doubling of expenses from one year to the next. Thank you.
Ann Fraser?
Yes, thank you. If you look at the city manager's budget for 2018 in the person in salaries and wages, you'll see it's 607,000. If you then look at the actual for 2020, it was 454,000. So that is a very rough estimate. You might say that the cost for the city attorney, if my assumptions are correct, was about 150,000 a year. And that includes benefits. So if you add that, the 150,000 to the whatever the city attorney services were 176,000 in 2018, it obviously comes to a great deal less than the 490,000 that we're expecting for this coming biennium.
Very well. Jerry, you have your hand up? No. All right, no questions. Councilor Jones, you still have your hand up? Okay. Any other comments or questions on this section? I will just add, I think that obviously the committee would appreciate Lauren receiving kind of a summary of expenses for city attorneys, whether in-house or outside over the years. So thank you for that. All right, shall we move on to item 8B, economic development, planning and building?
Chair, we still have to do city administration.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. City
Sure.
administration.
I have to find the page myself. So just a second. And I apologize for not mentioning the city attorney during the last section, but that one seemed to be the most self-explanatory item on the budget. So within the city manager's office, there's a personnel change. The deputy city manager's position was moved to this department rather than, I guess in the previous budget, it was identified as an economic development position, but this deputy city manager does so much more than just economic development. So we thought it would be more appropriate to place it within this department. Additionally, this is the department where the emergency manager will be housed. It was thought that putting a position in this office gave it the authority of this office, which as you're navigating the organization makes it a lot easier. And just so everybody knows, we're on page 38. Sorry about that. Finally, as we mentioned, we did not fill the deputy city recorder role. And I can jump into some specifics here. Like I mentioned previously, half of the lobbyist cost comes from the city manager's department, split with the city council. There is funding for, I'm sorry, related to the, Lauren, I missed which item that comes out of specifically.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
The split cost of the lobbyist is professional and technical services, right?
Professional and technical services, yes.
Yeah, just to be clear on that. Related to personnel related expenses, sorry, my notes here are the facilitators that we also use, and Lauren, I'm missing something else there. Is that also where we fund the vacation?
So
yeah.
Under personnel related expenses is the training and travel and membership dues for the 6 employees in that fund. Under the general office supplies, it's obviously office supplies, postage and printing. And then under professional and technical services, that's where the half of the lobbyist is.
Okay.
Code publications, website, facilitators, and any additional, and Jerry, the additional 40,000 or additional money in there.
Sure. So the additional 40,000 that Lauren just mentioned is 40,000 that was set aside for how the council decide, what we end up with an oversight board for the police. Felt like an appropriate place to put it. Moreover, it could also be used for any investigations or things of that nature. Finally, I want to return to the personnel related expenses because that number jumps quite a bit. With moving the deputy city manager's role into this office, there's an increase there. I think it was 12,000 before that, Lauren, we were allocating for that. And then moreover, during the time that I've been here, I've chatted with the assistant to the city manager, Dylan Digby, and our community relations coordinator, Alicia Schroyer. I don't believe that we have ever invested in training or conferences for them to attend and learn more a little bit about what they're doing. And given that there are our communication staff, I thought that was a smart move. Finally, with me being new, I wanted to be sure that I could get trained and attend conferences when need be. And I would also add that just for perspective, I think my ICMA membership, I think is about $1,500. So there's that cost in there as well. John, I just saw you come on the screen. I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add as long as you were here. But that's essentially the city manager's office. Sorry about, I have cascading levels of paper here, so I apologize for not having everything right in one place.
Certainly understandable. Abby?
Yes, thank you, city manager. It's really helpful also explaining out the things in there. I do actually have a question about the personnel related expenses. I mean, obviously, or at least me, training, support of your staff, you know, bringing them up to speed on things is important. I am though looking at the per capita cost of training per person. And I know we're not here to nickel and dime things to death, but it is at, for the biennium, close to $6,000 per person if we're looking at 6 FTE positions. And I'm just wondering if, you know, that's a big jump, unless I've done my math wrong on that. And just, you know, wanted some feedback. Will, you know, there'd be just so much more, especially for the emergency manager?
This is what we budgeted. It doesn't have a clearly identified expense related to every one of what we can see in the future. I can tell you just during the time that I've been here, nobody has gone to any trainings or anything of that nature. And so that's what we budgeted. Doesn't mean that we will spend every cent that's in that account. Moreover, as you identified, with that emergency management position, wanted to provide a cushion there so that whoever came into that role was able to take advantage of the funding that's been allocated there. But when I looked at it, that number has jumped out to me as well. So I understand and appreciate the concern.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments on this section? All right, thank you very much. Seeing none, now I think we're ready to move to 8B, Economic Development, Planning and Building.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. John Williams, I'm the Deputy City Manager. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Good to see you all. I'll be doing the 3 budgets under item 8B, and we'll try not to use much of your time. But it's clear to me there's a lot of interest in the economic development budget from the conversation earlier, the public comments, and that really comes as no surprise to any of us. The last year was a supremely eventful year in the world of West Linn businesses. And it seems like every week, I mean, I know at the city, we felt every week was a new adventure, but I know our businesses in the community felt the same way. New regulations, new questions, new health concerns, new federal programs, new state programs, new county programs, new city grant programs. It was a challenging year to be operating a business anywhere in this country, and West Linn was no different. And so I think our focus moving forward is really assisting businesses get back on their feet, deal with the debt that many of them have accumulated, figure out how to move forward in a productive way. And I appreciate our partners, Shatreen, Rebecca, you heard from earlier. And I appreciate all of the interest in economic development. I think it really is going to be kind of an all hands on deck type of approach in the next year. Jerry mentioned the American Rescue Plan. That is much needed relief for not just local governments. Obviously, we've been talking about the 5.4 million that the city gets, but the county's getting money, the state's getting money. There's $1.9 trillion of funding in the rescue plan that goes to businesses, that goes to individuals. So there's a lot of money flying in a lot of directions right now. And Lauren and Jerry and I and other department directors are trying to figure it all out and figure out what the best use of that funding would be. Ideally, as Lauren mentioned, we would have had it all figured out and put into this budget for your consideration. Unfortunately, the rules came out just recently. They're quite lengthy. We do have a sort of an arm's length grip on them, but our plan is to come back to council, perhaps the budget committee, in a month or so with a better analysis after talking to partners and getting smarter with other folks, and learning really what we can and can't use those funds for, and be able to put a plan together for the next 2 years. So that's certainly going to be a big piece of work. I mentioned the partnerships. We think that's going to be incredibly valuable. Shatreen and Rebecca are doing a great job with their boots on the ground, getting around the community, bringing in businesses into the fold, sharing programs with them, not just ours, but also at the county, state, and federal level. And no matter what we do on staff, we really can't be successful in this community without those business organizations doing their part too. There's clearly defined roles that make sense for each organization. You've already heard and you know we don't have funds specifically allocated for additional economic development staff in this budget, but we're happy to talk about it. I think the key question that we're all wanting to make sure we know is what is the work that needs to be done and who needs to do it? Is it a city staff person? Is it the chamber? Is it Main Street? Is it consultants? It's probably a combination of all of those things. So I just want to say that I really appreciate the attention to this issue because I think it's going to be critical. This budget is usually, it's on page 40, it's usually pretty static. As you've already heard, I, in recent years, have been the only person in this budget, but that really created a misleading impression, I think, that I spent all of my time on economic development. The reality is, I don't always know what I spend all of my time on, but it's something new every week. It's not always economic development. And I think it makes a lot more sense for this position, at least as we've been using it, to be in the management department. And then call the question about what do we want to do for economic development. So again, I won't answer that question, but we're happy to talk about it as this moves forward. So looking really at the budget, there's only two things really that need to be called out remaining. One is there's that big number in professional and technical services in 2021. That is the grant funding, the Coronavirus Relief Fund grant funding. That's where we put it, and that's where the grants went out of. And so we were very, very fortunate, and the businesses were fortunate to be able to get that money. We were happy to pass it through, and we're indebted to the council for authorizing that program. But that's what that big chunk of money is. That's all money that went out the door to businesses. Well, not all, but almost all of it is. And then one other thing I'd like to note is a expenditure that the council has discussed already this year. That's the professional and technical services proposed for FY 2022 that has a jump in expenses. This is a $50,000 for a consultant to continue our work on the tax increment financing work. So this is a project that council has been shepherding through. It would lead to the consideration by this community of a tax increment financing district for the waterfront project area that would allow us to start building up a fund to pay for infrastructure in that area. Tax increment financing is used for bricks and mortar type expenses. This would be something, the sooner we create it, the more revenue we can capture and the more we can do to accomplish our goals in the waterfront area, which have not even been determined yet by this community, but they will in the upcoming year, and I'll talk about that more in the planning budget. So I think I'll close it there on economic development, and maybe what I should do is take questions on each one of these three funds, and then I'll move on to the planning department next. So are there any questions about economic development at this time? I know there'll be more discussion later, probably.
Mayor Walters?
Yes, thank you, John. Thank you for that. And thank you, Chair. I had a question, and I don't know if it falls under economic development or planning, which is a project we've talked about a lot, which is the upzoning of the Highway 43 corridor, which in my opinion would bring in a lot of, start to bring in more revenue and economic development to the city of West Linn. You had mentioned that there was hopes at some point to hire a consultant to help with that work. How much is that consultant?
Well, we haven't really fully scoped it out because we don't have the money budgeted for it. Our guess was that $100,000 could get us very, very far down the road of that project. And if I might, Mayor Walters, when I talk about the project, I don't call it the upzoning of Highway 43. I think that sort of assumes a conclusion. We're talking about it as a rezoning project, looking for opportunities on Highway 43. And for those of you who aren't maybe familiar with this project, this is something we've been wanting to do for a while. You all know that we're hoping to do major street work in partnership with ODOT, the entire length of Highway 43, making it safer, more accessible to more modes. And we think there's a sensible project to go with it to make sure that we have land uses that complement that project along Highway 43. It's an opportunity area for us. We'd really like to look at it. We think that a $100,000 would allow us to hire consultants like architects, economic development folks, and public engagement people that would allow us to really do the work required for this fairly massive project. It's a big piece of work. We do not have that fund budgeted in the draft budget that you're receiving, but we have certainly heard about it already. That's a project of interest. I know Jerry and Lauren and I have heard from a number of folks on the budget committee, and we'd be happy to entertain discussions of how to do that. We think our plate is pretty full in planning. We have time to help manage the project, but we don't have the time or the expertise to actually do it. So that's why we are proposing that we would use consultants to get that work done.
Do you think there's, well, I've heard that there are opportunities like perhaps from Metro with their 2040 grants to get some matching funds for those consulting services. And I'm noticing that in the proposed budget, you have that under the technical services drop by 50,000 in 2023, fiscal year 2023. Are we able to maybe split those consulting services up over a couple of years, or I'm not sure how that works.
It's certainly possible. There are certainly grants out there. We applied for a grant from the state of Oregon that the council signed a letter of support for. Unfortunately, we did not get that. So we're not feeling super confident about our ability to get that grant or the Metro grant, but it's certainly possible. We have a great new friend at Metro in Councilor Christine Lewis, who has helped the council see the value of many West Linn projects already. So I think it's a possibility. If we had a bit of seed funds, we could probably get that project going at an amount that's less than the full project.
Okay, thank you. That I would just give a plug for that because that's something I think is really essential for the city. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on economic development?
Looks like we have a question, Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. And Budget Committee, I want to draw to your attention a note that Kathy Molesky sent you today, emailed to you at my request that I'm going to speak to ever so briefly. But it reiterates what we heard from some folks in public comment today about the opportunity we have in having someone on staff that's dedicated to business support. I am certainly not going to read my note to you, but I'm going to flag it and hit some highlights. I am going to suggest that our Budget Committee have a full-time position on staff that's focused solely on business support and economic development. As you well know, business leaders and advocates have sought this support for some time, and the economic challenges that the pandemic has posed to us has exposed the city's limited support for its business community. I asked the League of Oregon Cities to conduct some research on my request, and they identified 11 Oregon cities that I'll call our population peers, if you will, with a population between 20,000 and 32,000 people. Of those 11 cities, 9 of them have a staff person that's focused primarily on economic development, and that includes Ashland, Forest Grove, Happy Valley, Milwaukee, Newburgh, Redmond, Tualatin, Wilsonville, and Woodburn. The only 2 that did not among our population peers were Klamath Falls and Roseburg. West Linn Main Street also identified some other nearby cities with economic development specific positions, including Oregon City, Canby, Sherwood, and Tigard. And according to Main Street, Canby has 2 full-time staff working on economic development and tourism, while Oregon City has 3. I reached out to the relevant staff persons at those 11 cities named by League of Oregon Cities, and I heard back from 5. And I asked them 2 questions. What are your primary responsibilities? And in what specific ways has your work benefited your city? I'm not going to read them now, but you can see the compilation of their responses in that note that I sent to you today. And they talk about what their primary responsibilities are, which kind of answers the question, what could a business support specialist do for us right here? The benefits to the city, certainly it varies by city, and I want to emphasize that by listing those in that note, I'm certainly not indicating that West Linn needs nor even wants similar benefits, but these are simply the ones that those particular cities touted. In terms of what could this person do for our city, I went through multiple job descriptions for these individuals from cities provided by Main Street League of Oregon Cities. And the memo kind of offers a compilation of the various responsibilities that this person could do for us. And I certainly have those job descriptions available for you on request. And so I want to suggest to you that having this person on staff, I don't know if it's a quote need, but it's certainly an opportunity to support a vibrant business community and support of our residents. And it would help immensely if we had a dedicated staff person to business support and development. And so, yes, this is pure advocacy, my friends. I'm suggesting that we have that on staff. Now, whether we can find that in this budget or that's going to be available through ARP, through the American Recovery funds that are available to us, I'm open to conversation, and I'm heartened that the city manager said earlier that in the preliminary look at the provisions that have come out of the federal government, that they identified 3 areas in which the funds could be used, and one of them being help for the business community. So hopefully among those $5.4 million, we perhaps can find funding for this city position that our business leaders are clearly telling would help tremendously. Thanks.
Very good. Councilor Bialystowski, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question for John about the ARPA funding. And specifically, at one point, it was thought that we might be able to fund the Highway 43 consultants with American Rescue Plan dollars. And I was wondering if, with the guidance that's been released, if you still think that's a possibility to take 100,000 from that and then fund the much wanted project.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that comment, that question. And also I was going to have a similar comment in response to Councilor Jones's statement. Unfortunately, and I'm watching everyone's face to see what you, without it, the rest of that sentence, yeah. Unfortunately, the guidance that came out from the federal Treasury was more restrictive than we had hoped. And they really tied the funding eligibility to pandemic recovery, even in the economic development realm. For example, they specifically call out the general economic development activities are not permitted uses of these funds. So in anything that we do, we need to make a tie to pandemic recovery. And where I think you can make a good case for someone working on staff that they would be doing a lot of economic recovery work. Maybe you couldn't make the case that they were 100% doing activities that were about pandemic recovery. But there's also a question about how closely those funds are going to be audited and overseen, and how tight the definitions will be. But yet we still want to, and now I'm watching Lauren's face, because this is my favorite thing to say. We're going to want to stay within the rules and make sure that we are using the funds correctly so that we're not at risk of returning them. And Councilor Bialystowski, I think the same response would apply to the Highway 43 rezoning. You could potentially make a straight face case for some of that work to be ARP funded, but probably not all, if we wanted to stay very clean.
Okay, thank you. Abby Farber.
Thank you very much, Chair. I wanted to put out just one of my general philosophic statements about bringing on people to an organization that whether you're government or nonprofit or other things, relying on funding for those from potentially one-shot deals can be hazardous. It's great we're getting ARPA money. It's great, FEMA's going to do some things and that we're getting money from other sources. But I worry that, say, after the biennium, when we are facing a deficit, and we've added more people, I mean, it's easier to cut back on stuff than it is on people. And will we, by adding more staff, as much as we want them, relying on one-time grant, federal money is alarms me. And that's just a personal philosophy I've developed over time in working for all the different places I've worked.
Very good. Any other comments on the economic development portion? Yes, Councilor Aurelia.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is not necessarily just economic development, but it's also on planning and building. So will you entertain questions or comments on planning and building in conjunction with this?
Let me ask Mr. Williams, did you have a further presentation on planning and building?
I do.
So Councilor Aurelia, would you be okay if we held your question until the end of Mr. Williams' presentation?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Not seeing any. Mr. Williams, you want to proceed?
Thank you. I will, and I think these two will probably go a bit faster than economic development, which is such a hot button issue. And I know that Alyssa Preston is really dying to speak. She loves the spotlight. The building department would be the next one in order, and we're sort of stepping a little bit out of order in the budget because we're doing all of mine right now. I'll be speaking to building inspections and planning. Building inspection fund starts on page 75, and it is its own fund. One thing that's always important to remember about the building fund is that state law contains requirements for us about the use of building department fees. So we have to make sure that the funds that we're collecting for the building fees go to building department activities. And that's something that's very important for us to track. And even if we didn't, the home building industry pays very close attention to that. They pay attention to our fee increases and to the use of funds. So this is a fairly small department, like planning. Most of the expenses are in the people. You have a building official, you have 2 inspectors, and you have part of an admin assistant in this department. I want to just say a couple of things. They've had a highly unusual year working out of their trucks from COVID, doing video inspections, wearing masks during inspections. They show up before 6 a.m. to do the work so construction can proceed. They're out in the field in every kind of weather. They have done a fantastic job under very strange circumstances. And I really appreciate the work they do. It's sort of unsung work. But they make sure that all the construction that happens in the city is safe to code. And they really provide great customer assistance. If any of you have gone through a project that involves our building department team, they really go all out to make it work. So I want to extend my thanks to them. The building department budget, as I say, fairly straightforward. There is one thing I do want to address, but really we get fees and charges in here from building permits. It goes almost entirely to the staff in that department. We do maintain a contract inspection firm called Claire Company. They're in Corvallis, Oregon, and they do specialty plan review for us, and in some cases, specialty inspection. Much of the materials and services that you see in this line goes to that specialty inspector. Again, it's all paid by fees that we receive. There's a little bit of training, there's certifications and technological materials, but it's really a pretty straightforward budget. There is one thing that we would like to discuss with you, that it would be a proposed change to what you see on the paper here. In the next year, we expect the school district's new middle school to come in. And we had allocated, you'll see a proposed increase of funding and fees and charges revenues in 22. We had proposed an additional 125,000 that would represent that school building. In recent weeks, we have been working very closely with the school district to get a better understanding of what that building is and what the valuation of that building is and the complexity of inspections. We actually expect, all told, building, plumbing, mechanical, all of the permits, all of the fee costs for that building, according to the state adopted fee schedule, is probably likely to be more like $500,000 in permit fee from this middle school. And it, again, all the costs are related to the work that we do. So what we have been working through in recent weeks is how are we going to handle that big chunk of work and then return back to normal. Our proposal is that we would send some of the more complicated inspections and or plan reviews to the consulting firm. So we're proposing to send of that additional revenue an additional $215,000 to materials and services. but we're also proposing a limited duration, 1-year staff person who would be on site and responsible for many of the hundreds of inspections that will make up this building, as well as the stadium expansion and other projects in town. We expect that need to start sometime late this fall and be done sometime in 2022. It's not necessarily work that we're hoping to do, but it's work that needs to be done. And so that's our proposal. Again, it has not an impact because it's all paid for by fees. So it's not a proposal that would impact the general fund, except to the extent that Lauren will have to deal with the transfers and all of that, and we can work that out. But I did want to propose that here. And my understanding from Lauren is if you were in favor of that, that it would have to be encompassed in the motion that you make at the end and your recommendation on the budget. I'd be happy to send this out by email with details and numbers and all of that if it'd make it easier for your consideration. That is all I have in the Building Inspections Fund. If you have questions for me, and I also have a short overview of planning next.
All right, any questions on building? Yes, Sheila Waldron.
Thank you. I just have a question on the revenue, the proceeds from leases. So 2020 was 55,000, 2021 was 75. I see there wasn't anything budgeted and there's nothing budgeted for the next biennium. So that was just temporary revenue we had coming in. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Lauren, can you address that one?
Yes, so this is actually a new accounting standard from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, the GASB. GASB 87 came out and basically changed our way of accounting for leases. It made things a lot more complex from our standpoint and from the reader's standpoint, in my opinion. But basically what that did was it requires us now, and you'll see this in multiple funds. You'll see it in the general fund, the building fund, I believe the parks fund, and the water fund, streets fund. You'll see it in a few different funds. But basically what this is we lease vehicles from Enterprise Rental Car instead of owning vehicles in certain departments. And it's considered a capital lease. And so the accounting standard now is saying that when we originally lease those vehicles, we have to account for the full amount of the lease. So say a car was $35,000, that was the market value of the car. We would have to account for that as a proceed from lease and revenue, and then offset that with an expenditure and capital outlay for the exact same amount. So we're capitalizing that full amount of the lease. So it's an in into the revenue and an out in the capital outlay expense. And then as the lease obligation goes on, and as we're paying those monthly or quarterly or semi-annual or annual payments, we account for those as debt service, which is very interesting because we didn't have debt service in a lot of these funds. So it did make it a little bit complex because it implemented during this biennium, the current biennium that we're in. So council next month will be seeing a supplemental budget to take those changes into account. It really doesn't make a huge difference in our bottom line. It's a little bit more challenging to budget for it because normally we would just budget for, if we were to purchase a vehicle, we would just purchase, put the capital in 1 year. If we were going to lease a vehicle, we would kind of have an idea of how much we were going to spend over the vehicle lease in materials and services or in a capital outlay line item for the lease payments. With this, if we turn over a vehicle in the middle, like if we get an offer, which apparently we get quite frequently, to trade one of our older vehicles in for a new lease vehicle, and there could be some savings potentially, every time we get that new vehicle, we have to count it as revenue and the full expense, which for budgeting purposes is a challenge because you will probably likely see a lot of supplemental budgets over the next few years for this specific reason, because we don't know when we're going to get those offers, when there'll be trade-in opportunities. And hopefully we might be going, well, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I would hope that eventually we could go away from that model of renting or leasing the vehicles versus purchasing, because it's an accounting issue. Does that make sense? Or are there any other questions on that?
That was helpful for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on building? Seeing none, let's move to planning.
Thank you. Wrapping up my part of this, the planning department, another one of those funds that's almost entirely all personnel, especially in the years, in the back years of this budget. The planning department consists of planning manager, our new planning manager, Darren Wise, who's been with us for a number of years, but recently got promoted into the manager position. We now are at full strength in the planning department with 3 professional planners working under Darren for the first time in quite some time, almost the first time since I've been here. We are at full strength, and we're super excited about that. We also have Linn Schroeder, our multi-talented administrative assistant, who completes the team. The planning department handles mandatory development review applications, everything from subdivisions to annexations to the planning side of building permits, lot line adjustments, all of that kind of stuff. The mandatory work, and they do the community zoning projects and code projects that the Council and Planning Commission prioritize. In recent years, because we have had a series of turnover, a lot of the work that's been, when we have staff shortages, it's the mandatory work that has to get done, and it's the fun community work that suffers. So we are looking forward in this biennium to actually be able to take on a number of the council prioritized docket projects. And as a result, you'll see in the materials and services line item, and planning fund, I'm sorry, is on page 79. You'll see proposed increases from past in that materials and services line. And this is to provide support, including outside technical support consultants for some of the community projects. So the main ones that we expect to spend money on in this biennium are the city's response to House Bill 2001 and 2003. These are the middle housing requirements created by the state of Oregon that all communities in Oregon are responding to. We have a grant from the state of Oregon to do that work. Many of you will have seen the surveys and other work happening on that. But we do have, the grant doesn't pay for all of our expenses, and we are expecting to need a little bit of help to bring that project to a conclusion over the next 2 years. We also have, and so for sense of scale, each of these ones I'm talking about is about $25,000 per year in the next 2 years. So $25,000 in each year for the House Bill 2001, $25,000 in each year for technical services on the waterfront project, which we are hoping to be able to create the vision plan and the zoning overlays in the waterfront area, working with the community over the next year or so. Finally, a project near and dear to Councilor Bielostowski's heart, which is the Clear and Objective Code Standards. This is a state mandated, well, essentially mandated because of court cases, but related to state law. West Lynn's code does not pass muster when it comes to having what are called clear and objective standards. It's a requirement of state law for housing that your standards have to be, I'll say it one more time, clear and objective. Trying to find other words for those on the fly is not easy, as it turns out. We have problems in our code and we need to fix them. We have consultants that we are hoping to get to do an audit of our code, come back to the Planning Commission and the Council with an assessment of where our code needs to be improved. We expect that project to take a bit of work. And unfortunately, we weren't able to get it started. We were hoping to get the RFP on the streets, but ice storm, etc., and it just set us back. So we are actually going to be requesting to increase our carryover in planning from $25,000 to $50,000 in order to get that project started. We were hoping to get the first work done in June. We don't expect it to be done until July or August now. So we'll need a little bit of that money carried over into the next biennium. But we're excited about the next few years. We're excited about the projects that we have planned. And there was a question earlier about Highway 43 zoning. This work would be overseen by the planning department with outside assistance. So those are my thoughts on the planning department. And I know Council President Relia had a question that encompassed all of it, so I'd be happy to take that.
Ms. Councilor Aurelia.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Williams, for your presentation. When Council last spoke with Director Calvert about the Highway 43 project, Public Works, Engineering, and Master Planning in general, he mentioned the need for additional staff for the multitude of projects, some of them which you mentioned. I'll enumerate the ones I'm most familiar with that are on the immediate forefront. House Bill 2001 and 2003, Highway 43, the school districts projects, the Willamette Falls Drive project for pedestrian and bicycle paths, the proposed pedestrian bridge, the proposed riverfront trail, the Abernathy Bridge, I-205 widening, the need for a larger pipe to maintain our seismic protection over our water supply through the South Fork Water Board, historic City Hall, the old paper mill, the locks. We have an abundance of some fairly large scale projects coming down the pipe in the not too distant future. I'm seriously concerned about the staffing levels that we have in the planning department, as well as in the public works department and the engineering staff to help us get through all of those master plans and the detailed overview process that most cities utilize in order to get through that process. And as you mentioned, there are some opportunities for outsourcing some of those efforts, but certainly, at least in my opinion, from a quality perspective, they're best done in-house. And so there's been this talk tonight about an economic development director, and I'd just like to hear your opinion, given the opportunity. Would an economic development director be best suited and recommended in your opinion, or would some additional staff in the planning department needed to help with this multitude of other projects be more appropriate?
Well, thank you for that question. That list was a little overwhelming to me. Is that all the things we're doing? It is, and you just described the projects that take a great deal of time for me, for Jerry, for Lance, and for much of our staff. And really, the things you listed are almost all just on one side of town, and there's lots of things happening all over. I think it is a tremendous amount of work. You'll be hearing, first answer to that question is you'll be hearing from Lance on Wednesday about some staff proposals and I believe Jerry already enumerated them in the message, staff proposals in the Public Works Department funded by utility funds to assist with some of the projects you just listed. So Willamette Falls Drive, the Bike and Ped Bridge, Highway 205, the water line, all of those, Lance is requesting additional staff to help him get that done, including a communication person focused entirely on public works, which would help us immensely in the public engagement, the business engagement with that. I feel that in response to your question, I think we're well staffed in planning. If we could get the additional resources that we've proposed and that I've described to assist our staff with consultant expertise where needed, I believe we can get the things done that the docket calls for us to complete. in the planning world. I do think the economic development position would allow us to do a number of things that the city does not currently do and hasn't done for a number of years. Business outreach, connecting businesses to resources much more than I'm able to do, and making that business connection to some of the public works projects, I think would be immensely helpful. Another way of answering that question is, would we take more planners if the community was inclined to fund them? Yes, we would. And I think we could do even more and do it even better and do it with more engagement. The budget you have in front of you is our best proposal to bring you what we saw as the priorities within a funding amount that we had available to us. So I think we've tried to call out the best we could do in achieving all the goals that you described, Councilor Relia. That's not a complete answer, but it's the best I can do on the spot.
I thank you for your consideration and appreciate your opinion, sir.
Thank you. Any other questions on planning? As I mentioned, Alyssa is dying to speak, I'm sure. She's not on screen, so I can't confirm that, but.
Any other questions? Seeing none, before we move to HR, just very briefly, I want to just poll the committee. Sorry, Alyssa. Does anybody need a 5-minute hydration break? We've been going a little over 2 hours now, or are we all good? So maybe a thumbs up if you'd like 5 minutes off, or a thumbs down if you're good the way we are. I see a few, I see some ups. I see, oh boy, I see a lot of, I do see mostly downs. So let's do this. If somebody needs a hydration break, feel free to step away and do it. But I think we'll press on based on what I saw there. So with that, thank you, Mr. Williams, and Alyssa, we'll turn it over to you.
Good evening. I will try to lower my spotlight for John's sake and make this fairly quick. My name is Alyssa Preston. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the HR director for the city. And our HR department is primarily or solely internal services. So this will actually be kind of a brief presentation. Most of our expenses are in personnel. You'll see that we have not changed our personnel size in many years. Have been going back probably 8 years or so. We have 2.8, which means we have 3 persons, 3 bodies, but one of them just doesn't work a full 40 hours. Did you have a question?
What page are you on?
I'm so sorry. 42. Thank you. So moving down, we in our materials and services, the personnel related expenses are just HR staff expenses. Those would include training, travel, which we have not been doing, conferences, professional memberships, subscription dues, recruitment expenses. And we've had a little bit of fluctuation with that. Sorry, I just heard some feedback. No, okay. Just don't want to miss somebody if you had something to ask. General office supplies, pretty minimal. We probably haven't even spent anything in, or much of anything in office supplies in the last year. Our professional and technical services are the largest expense item in M&S, and that does include everything from our employment and labor attorney costs. Those ones do not go through the city council's city attorney services. Those do go through HR. We also pay for COBRA administration for early retirees and separated employees. We also pay for an employee assistance program or an EAP, you might have heard EAP or an EASE. And we also do our citywide compliance training out of that particular line item. But you will notice towards the third from the bottom, I am proposing additional training in the next 2 years. I've heard a lot internally about the desire to receive more training, and we would love to be able to provide more training. One of the things that we've heard a lot from managers this last year has been, we were kind of thrown into this pandemic and we had never managed teleworking staff, and as you know, it certainly has brought up some interesting scenarios or interesting management things that we need to try to help our staff and our managers work through. And who knows how long, you know, before we'll be going to a hybrid model or whatnot, but we really do want to be able to start investing more in training of our employees to be able to work in these hybrid or these teleworking arrangements. So because we've heard so much interest from that internally, we have added that line item where it is not normally part of that other professional technical services. We also do have a benefits broker service that we pay for. That is the next line item down. That is just under 40,000. They have not raised their rates since we've had them for about 6 or 7 years, which is wonderful. So that's a pretty steady number. And then, as I mentioned, that performance training line would be basically just to help out our workforce. We've had a pretty upset this year, so we would like to be able to do that. And then the very last line item is on purchase services. This would be, in the past years, we've used it as a wellness program or wellness resources, but we would like to increase it a little bit more. I've heard quite a bit, even from council, that there is a desire to bring back an employee recognition program and really start investing a lot more into employee recognition. So that's where we have placed a few extra $1,000 a year into that line. Pretty simple. Did I keep it under 2 minutes? Does anybody have any questions?
You did quite well. Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Preston? Oh, goodness. You must have been very clear. No questions at all. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We will move on now to, I believe it's going to be the IT department is next up. Mr. Boyle.
Well, hello, Budget Committee and City Council. I'm rather excited to be on this conversation tonight. I'm bringing to this group a budget that on its face may not seem anything fancy or specific, but it's a bit transformational. My organization in these next 2 years, if this group funds us, will be moving substantial portions of our infrastructure to the cloud. I'd like to take a few minutes and kind of outline some of the reasons why we're deciding that this is the right time to make that move, and then we'll move into some of the more detailed parts of that move. I'd like to show you a few slides if that's okay. Give me a moment here. All right, can everybody see the slide deck?
Yes, we can see it.
Great. So this biennium, the infrastructure, the premise-based server infrastructure that we've been running the city on for the past 5 years will be out of warranty, and we can no longer continue to run our infrastructure on that hardware. We either need to move that hardware to the cloud, or we need to invest in additional premise-based infrastructure. Now, in order to take on additional premise-based infrastructure would potentially require bringing on additional FTE in my department. And, you know, I spent a lot of time weighing the pros and cons and thinking about these kind of 3 categories before putting together this biennium. And I'd like to take this group through some of the thinking that I went through in order to kind of decide that this is the right biennium to make this move and go from there. We have in my department kind of 3 areas that you know, was really a big driver on kind of this decision. The big one is human resources. You know, the skilled labor pool in Portland for IT professionals is very, very tight. As an example, I'm competing for labor not only with public sector, but also private sector as well. You know, as an example, when I needed to hire a network administrator 3 years ago, it took 6 months and 2 recruiting pools to bring somebody on who had, you know, a skill set that we needed to support the organization. As an example, in competing with other public sector agencies, the City of Wilsonville just released a network administration position for hire that has a wage scale 8% higher than my network administrator here in West Linn. So it's tough to bring people into government with the current wage and scale that we have to offer here. The wages and benefits, we may offer more in terms of benefits, but for a younger IT professional, wages seem to be more important to them necessarily than healthcare benefits and some of those other things. That may be unique to my department. I can't speak to that for the rest of the organization. Contract services. A lot of IT departments get by with additional contract services. Well, the rate in which the hourly rate of a loaded network administrator or desktop administrator in my department, I think is somewhere between $40 and $50 an hour. For me to go hour for hour with contract services, I might be paying much more than that in contract services rates. A lot of organizations charge anywhere from 100 to 250 an hour for IT professionals, with different varying skill sets. Westland likes to run a staff lean government. So coming to this organization and asking for another FTE when so many other departments are desperately in need of additional FTEs for more public-facing projects and items, left me really thinking that asking for additional headcount, doesn't make sense when there's so much need. Within my organization, we are seeing a 3-to-1 growth from departments asking for, how do I do things better, rather than, can you help me fix it that's broken? So I'm seeing a greater demand on my team to make the organization better through business process improvement and other means. So in terms of human resources, I need more human resources, but I need them in the right places. And hiring an additional FTE just didn't make sense. So I thought, well, can I take my existing labor pool and through some strategic outsourcing actually achieve more of my staff time back to put it towards other value added activities within the organization. On the technology side, for a long time, we've been operating capital-based infrastructure. That's where you buy hardware and software, you install it within your organization, and then you have to have the skilled pool of labor to maintain it, operate it, secure it, and take care of it. Operational IT infrastructure, as we like to refer to it as going to the cloud, has really been on the rise in the last decade. And I feel that we have reached a point where if we were to move a substantial portion of our infrastructure to the cloud, kind of an operational design, I feel confident or comfortable that we would be either providing the same service levels or improved service levels to the organization by making that move. And finally, as this group may be aware if they're watching the news, the threats coming at private sector and government sector just continue to get more and more structurally deviant. Recently the gas pipeline shut down gasoline to the East Coast. So I am constantly weighing out, spending resources on securing our data and preventing us from terrorist threat or attack, because we do operate infrastructure that might look might be targetable by terrorists just to sow seeds of problems in the country. So with all of those things kind of weighing on my mind, I put together a budget that will take us into a cloud-based infrastructure that I think will benefit the city substantially. So now I'm kind of moving into, where are these highlights? So across fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, there are 3 main categories in the budget that you may be seeing substantial jumps in terms of spend on IT infrastructure. Within the equipment repair and maintenance category, the reason you're seeing a jump in those costs is that is where the IT department pays for all of the maintenance agreements for the software that many of our departments run. So one example might be our financial software, Encode. That software is currently premise-based on servers in our infrastructure. Tyler Technologies actually offers a complete cloud migration solution for that software. So to make that move from premise to their cloud, the cost per year does go up a little bit, and then many of the other softwares that other departments are running that are currently premise-based are represented in that that increased budget number and moving those softwares to the vendor clouds, where they become ultimately responsible for securing them, maintaining them, and providing new feature enhancements as they come out. The next category in which you see substantial increase in IT budget spend is the operating materials and services line. Within that area of the budget, that is where I am breaking out what I call infrastructure as a service. Those are all of the services that we would need to procure to run servers in the cloud. So any line of business application that we can't move to a vendor hosted cloud, we would then move to either an Amazon, a Microsoft Azure, or a Google Cloud, and we would host them ourselves, maintain them ourselves, and take care of them. There's a cost benefit associated with that move. Some vendors don't make moving their applications to the cloud cost effective. In that case, we could move them to what we call a private cloud or kind of a hybrid cloud, i.e. the Amazon, Microsoft, or Google world, and still take care of those servers at a possibly a cost reduction over a vendor situation. And then in the final category, the communication charges, you're not going to see a lot of change there. I was able to move some things around and free some dollars up in that category, but we're actually going to be implementing a secure connection from our data center to those three secure clouds. So any of the assets that we do relocate to private cloud / hybrid cloud, we would have a secure communication medium to get to them that would be protected from, they wouldn't be going over the direct internet, they would be going over kind of a private connectivity there. So the outcomes I'm looking to achieve with this cloud sourcing of most of the infrastructure is an 86% reduction in premise managed servers. That's not all infrastructure, that would just be the server / application load that my department takes care of. And what would that reduction look like? That would actually increase labor in my department by 40%, which that would be about a half-time FTE on network administration and about quarter of my time that could be reallocated to things like business process improvement. That's where we would go in and we would work with departments to help them streamline their software, implement better processes. Those different processes have a direct impact on citizen access to services or the ability for departments to deliver services to citizens. And the big one is business intelligence. We want to be assisting with taking the data that we have in many of our application sets and converting that more into information to help drive business decisions or service decisions within the organization. So I guess I'd like to open it up to the group here if they had any questions around any parts of my budget, and would be happy to speak to them if that's okay.
All right. Thank you, Shane. And I see Abby Farber. Go ahead.
Shane, thank you. I find that tremendously exciting, having seen, the proliferation of cloud-based applications and just how reliable they are, dependent, and also taking the load off and your own staff's IT people to, put that on there. A couple questions. Is telephony included, telephones and that kind of in these budgets? I just bring this up because I remember at least one incident this past year where our phone lines were down for City Hall, for the library, things like that. And if that was, you're going to switch over maybe to whatever it is that you could switch to and also doing this.
That's an outstanding question. Actually, yes, near the end of fiscal 23, we transitioned from a premise-based phone system to a hosted phone system. Now, the nice thing is that we can actually pick up and move our existing UC system to an actual local provider in Tigard that actually provides that kind of migration support to governments and school districts. So we're actually going to be test driving this firm this fiscal year 22 with they're going to be helping us with managing our existing premise-based phone system. And if they turn out to be as good as we think they are, when towards the end of fiscal 23, when the hardware in our phone system needs to be replenished, we're going to actually just migrate our configuration to their cloud and go from there. But obviously, we're going to do a little try it before you buy it to make sure that they're the right fit. Otherwise, there are several other companies that I've talked to in developing these budget numbers that would be happy to do the same exact thing for us. They would take over and host all of our circuits. They would host redundancy in the phone system. So, and they would provide any assistance with changes and adds and things like that in terms of our setup. So yes, I'm thinking holistically about where we're going, and yes, that would be certainly included in that design. You know, if we're aggressive and can get this done in the next 2 years, then there wouldn't be a whole lot left on premise. I think we might have 7 physical servers that we need on premise, and then I'm estimating anywhere from 10 to 15 at the most in a hybrid cloud situation. And we might even be able to crank that down better. And then we would be working with individual departments as they needed new software to find the best solution for either, you know, it being hosted by the vendor themselves, or if we need to put it in our hybrid cloud and kind of manage it that way. But yeah, it gives us a lot of flexibility. One of the things I do want to point out to the budget committee, though, is that moving from a capital to an operations-based infrastructure is not going to reduce our M&S spend. I think something that's important to point out is that government tends to get 30 to 45% discount over MSRP on any premise-based hardware and software. It's one of the things that sort of has made, you know, government procurement very easy to stay on-prem versus go to the cloud. Most cloud providers are providing, you know, minimal discounts to government for cloud infrastructure. So my M&S budget, you know, looks a little hefty these next 2 years. We're hoping to stabilize that out after these 2 years. I can't guarantee that we're going to see substantial drops, though, because you know, the trade-off is do we bring additional bodies on to my department and continue premise-based, cheaper premise-based infrastructure, or do we make the move to the cloud and adopt the operational style and just know that we're going to have more materials and services spend to maintain these things. You know, to your point, Abby, earlier, you know, bringing people on in a represented environment. You know, it's once you bring people on, you know, it's not very easy to, you know, move them out of the organization once they're on. So.
Thank you. And just what about redundancy in terms of power source as well? Generators, you know, those kinds of things.
In terms of where we're going or current state on-prem?
In terms of where we're going.
So anything moved to either an Amazon, Microsoft, or a Google data center, they have both east and west for resiliency and redundancy. So even though we would be parked in probably a West Coast data center for quicker access, we would have duplication in east data centers that could be spun up as part of the SLA. So, you know, that is another reason why the cost for cloud-based services are a little more expensive than premise, because they are taking on that additional cost associated with deduplication.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up, Ann Fraser.
Thank you. I just have a question about the 2021 budget and the line operating materials and service. I know you've been talking about the future, but this fiscal year, you have a huge increase in that line, even more than what you've proposed for 2022 and 23. So can you just talk about that, please?
Oh, absolutely. So that line actually includes all of the equipment that I purchased with CARES Act funding. So that huge increase you see over what was allocated is related to the $200,000 that I spent of CARES Act funding. And Lauren will be doing a supplemental budget, I think she referred to earlier in the conversation, that will show those numbers being covered by the CARES Act money. So what I purchased with those funds were telecommuting laptops and desktops. The really cool thing about that purchase was that all of that equipment could easily move back in-house and replace machines that I have in-house that are going on 6-7 years. So everything that I bought with CARES Act funding for telework can either continue to function as telework equipment or can come back in-house and eliminate computers that are ready to go anyways. So I made sure that when I bought smart.
Okay, any other questions for Shane? Shane, I have one quick question about training. I think with all the ongoing threats that we see in the news all the time, and all the ransomware and everything that we hear about. I'm assuming, I don't see an item for training here, but I just wondered maybe you could describe any ongoing training that your people have.
Yes, so thank you for asking. My training budget is actually in personnel-related expenses, that 41610 line. So you'll notice a small uptick in that for the coming biennium. That does include additional training on managing cloud services for my team. We actually maintain a subscription to Stormwind on a regular basis that provides hundreds of hours of training on Cisco things, networking, switches, security, Windows servers. And I tend to invest at least 2 to 3 weeks in each member of my team, meaning that I expect them to spend that many hours a year, 2 to 3 weeks a year, periodically over the course of a fiscal year, pursuing training relevant to not only their work year, but I do also like to give them the opportunity for some stretch training. So not 2020, but 2019 fiscal year, both of my team actually took certified ethical hacker training for a week, where they learned about the ins and outs of how hackers tend to compromise your network. Fiscal 20, I actually commissioned a security study from an independent firm, and we've actually got a security document that gives us some idea of where we've got some vulnerabilities internal and some stuff to work on. And we've been working on those steadily over the last several months and years as the pandemic has let us kind of go tackle those things. And then I think that covers, well, so in addition to the training for my staff, I've actually taken some steps and hardened some of our infrastructure. And what I mean by that is that we actually have taken on a endpoint protection software. I don't want to give any details on what it is because it makes us vulnerable, but the software actually is managed 24/7 by a live staffed group of individuals who, if there is a attack on a server, a desktop, or something that nature, they actually take remediation even in the middle of the night and can stop it or inform us. So we're actually kind of past, in some cases, trying to self-train on some of these technologies, and we're actually bringing in people who have a lot more expertise, through contract services that make us stronger. So.
Great, thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Shane? Seeing none, thank you, Shane. Appreciate it very much.
Nope, I appreciate this group support, and I look forward to wrapping up these discussions and moving into the meat of the work coming.
Great. All right, let's move on to Finance and Municipal Court.
Great, thank you. So for finance, which is on page 44, we are keeping the same staffing levels. We have 4.8 FTEs. That includes half of my position. Half of my position is funded for municipal court, and half of it is funded for in the finance department. And a lot of part-time people in our department. So we have a finance manager, Josh Cam, who's on this call, and he's our full-time position. And then we have one other full-time position and then 3 other part-time positions in our department. So that is what makes up that personnel, salaries, and wages line item. You'll see a little bit of an uptick this year. That was due to hiring someone while I was on FEMLA leave. I don't expect it to actually come in and around that amount, but it hopefully a little bit lower than that. But there's a little bit of an uptick in fiscal year 21 due to that. Under materials and services, personnel related expense, that is the membership dues and training for our department. We have 2 CPAs, myself and Josh, that have CPE requirements to maintain those CPAs, and other training for the rest of our staff and membership dues. Under office supplies, it's kind of a catch-all. It says office supplies, but it entails much more than that. So included in office supplies is printing of our budget, of our CIP, the audit, printing, our cover designs for those books, publications of those, budget advertising, tax forms, and lien searches. So it's kind of a weird category. I probably over the next biennium might break that out a little bit more into more detail, so it doesn't look like we're spending $30,000 a year on office supplies, because it is much more than that. Under professional and technical services, that includes items like our secured car pickup from Brinks for our cash deposits. They pick up our cash so that we don't have the security risk of walking it to the bank or driving it to the bank. Our bond counsel, financial advisors, consultants, and a little bit in there for TIF related tax increment financing in the next budget cycle. The last item on there is very self-explainable. That's our auditing contract. We just renewed our contract with Marina and Company this year. So they will be auditing us for the next 5 years, and those are their fees in there. Are there any questions on any of that?
Any questions? Nope, not seeing any.
Great. Okay, well, I will move on to municipal court then, if everyone is good with that. That's on page 50. Municipal court has 3 FTEs. As I mentioned, that's half of my position is included in there. And then 2 full-time positions and 1 half-time position. Under personnel related expenses, they have a very limited amount for training and travel there. And under office supplies, it's general office supplies, book publications, also a pretty small amount there. Professional and technical services includes funding for a pro tem judge, any judges, if there's a conflict of interest, witness and jury fees, public defenders, and interpreters. So that's pretty much just the functioning of the court there. Kind of to go back on that, our municipal court fines and revenues fees are on page 34. They are a component of the fines and forfeitures, and as you can see, that's pretty significantly down over the last few years. We're hoping not hoping that there might be a little bit of an uptick when operations resume. But other than that, if there are any questions on municipal court, I would love to take those now.
Any questions? Ann Fraser?
Yes, I just have a question on the professional and technical services line.
Yes.
It kind of doubles from 2021 to 22. And I wondered if you could just talk about that.
Well, partially it's because we haven't really been holding in-person courts for this year. We have had online court, and we have pushed all of our jury trials to next biennium virtually. All of our jury trials obviously couldn't be in person, so any jury fees, we have, I think, quite a few in the fall of this year that are scheduled if COVID guidelines allow for that. Also, we haven't had quite as many cases this year. A lot of citations have been down. We don't really have a lot of the pro temp judge fees and the public defenders, interpreters. We haven't really had a lot of court cases. A lot of them have just been either over the phone or an online court case. We also haven't had court for a lot of this year, so that's why you see a significant uptick in that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Lauren? Seeing none, thank you, Lauren. Appreciate it.
Yep.
We'll move on to police. Chief Mahuna.
Hi, welcome Budget Committee and Council. I'm going to ask Lauren to hang around just for a second, just in case you guys have specifics about line items. But for the most part, have stayed right at 34.5 FTEs. For the next biennium, we're going to drop down 1. There was an unfunded police officer position that was not funded in the last biennium that we are replacing with a behavioral health person out of our M&S funds. This is in response, of course, to the national narrative about trying to get the right people to the right type of police calls involving people in mental crisis. And this is our stab at that. The city of West Linn doesn't have enough of those calls all by themselves to warrant a full-time position like that. And so we were able to partner with Lake Oswego to make that happen. So that's very exciting. The rest of our budget is basically staying the same. Our personnel services, we have a lot of training that we are required to do for the state to maintain our police officer certifications with the state. And there's also been a huge push from the community, and rightly so, to get our officers better trained in a variety of different arenas, to include, more cultural awareness, racial and bias training, cultural competence, things like that. So our training budget has been going up. This last year, nobody basically trained on anything because most of the trainings were canceled due to COVID, obviously. But training is going to be a priority for the department in the next biennium. A large portion of our contract, of our budget, is going to our 911 dispatch contract with LOCOM. That's several $100,000. And then it's expensive to run a police department. We have a lot of cars. We have gear, tasers. They're only good for so many years, and then they got to be replaced. To outfit a police officer in the gear is a lot of money, and so there's a lot of materials and services that goes into that. I anticipate you guys will have a lot of questions. One of them will probably be body worn cameras, so I'll just jump into that one right now. We're getting bids right now. The first bid we got back after seeing the product was very expensive. It's about $200,000 over a 5-year period. But body worn cameras are a very expensive proposition. We currently do not have a funding source identified for that. But I want them. The police department wants them. We just need to figure out how to get the money to do them. Come along with the costs of body worn cameras, the equipment and stuff is not really the big cost. The big cost comes with data storage and redaction services every time we need to redact the film before it goes to either public release or to trial. So that's going to be a huge cost to that. Is there any other specific questions that somebody may have?
I saw.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ed. Sorry.
Sorry, Peter, but Jerry, I think I saw your hand up first.
Lauren, you and I have talked a little bit about the potential funding sources for cameras. Can you share that with everyone?
Yeah, so out of the police fund, we do have a positive balance over our reserves at the end of this biennium of about $266,000. However, at the end of next biennium, it is in the hole under the reserve amount by about 1.4 million. So, there is the potential. I know council and budget committee, a lot of members have expressed their interest in adding that to the budget. That can be done. It would be an $80,000 additional expense in this, or in the first year of the biennium, and about $30,000 in the second year, and then the $30,000 for the next 3 years after that. It wouldn't put us outside of our reserves in this fund. However, I would appreciate finding the savings somewhere else if possible. And so if that's the budget committee's will, then that's what we'll do, and hopefully have some savings in some other areas.
Okay, thank you. Abby, I think you were next.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief Mahuna. It's very informative and helpful to see it broken down this way. And it's great to hear that you are a proponent and that the officers support body cameras as well, which is something I support. And I think it's part of re-engaging trust in the police department among the community. I have asked this question a few times, and I'll just put it out there again, that I do ask, if we're looking for areas of savings, that at some point we carefully look at our staff on the police department, especially patrol officers, as it compares to other cities of our size and type. That it's, I haven't done any. Well, I did do some looking at Wilsonville, which does contract out for its police. I know that. But that just looking at, is there, are we potentially overstaffed? And could there be some savings there to put forth from other things, perhaps again in the police department as well? And I don't expect anybody to answer this question, but it's a question I feel like I need to keep asking. I've been asking since I was involved in promoting police reform as well. So I'm putting that out there. I would love to see a comparison between perhaps West Linn and Wilsonville, and just say, what does our staffing look like? My actual question, and I'll make this short, is have any of the negotiations with the non-exempt the union members and the police union, has any of that resulted in potential higher costs to us?
Now, let me make sure. Well, first of all, let me go back. I can answer your first question. If you go to page 61 of the budget committee, it'll show you that the city of West Linn is actually, as an independent city and not a contract city, as Wilsonville and Happy Valley are, we're actually the lowest per capita numbers of officers per 1,000 per capita in the entire metropolitan area. And so when we're at 1.1 and we're the lowest. When you think about this for a second, when we put out a minimum of 3 officers per shift 3 times a day, we have a city of 26,000 people, and we have 3 police officers that go through that are responsible for responding to all the calls within the city at that time. That's a pretty staggering number if you think about it. 3 people for the entire city. So if we get one big incident, we're not going to anything else until we resolve that incident. So there's at some point it becomes unsafe for the police officers to be out there by themselves in a city of 26,000. So if we reduce staffing anymore, we'd be ineffective. We start having to cut patrol times, or we start having to cut services, no more, maybe no SRO, no traffic, nothing specialized like that. Down to 1 detective. I mean, we have a big city with a bunch of stuff going on. So I feel like we are at or below minimums of being able to respond to what the city throws at us on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. Your question about if we have incurred cost for the negotiations, I guess I don't.
I meant are we going to have to be paying when the union you're negotiating right now? I know you personally are not, but the city is undergoing negotiations with the police union. Is that going to result in higher costs, salaries, benefits, anything like that?
Well, I certainly don't have. I'm not Karnak. I don't know how it's gonna end up. I can only assume that the unions will be asking for more compensation at some point. What they end up with, that's up for the negotiators to decide. I can only anticipate that it'll probably be an increase.
Okay,
Probably.
Is that increase built into the biennium budget or no?
Lauren?
We have some minor projections, like cost of living increases in benefit variables that we have across the city built in for those items. We don't have any major changes to that police contract. Other than that, any new additional benefits that would cost a lot of money or anything like that. But we do have a cost of living and general increases for step increases and things of that nature.
Okay, are you expecting any more than that? Because it doesn't, between 21 and it just doesn't seem like a big one in there that's been accounted. I mean, how comfortable are you based on past history that it's not going to write up?
I think that's really a question for the negotiation team of what they're expecting. Part of what's hard about budgeting when you're in negotiations is you have no idea what is going to be asked in those negotiations and where we're going to end up. And so generally we put a number out there and we try to stick within that. But, depending on how the negotiations go, it might be a little bit more or less than that. Hopefully less. But I don't know if there's been anything financially requested at this point. But I'm assuming there'll be some form of an ask.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, next up I saw Councilor Baumgartner, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief Mahuna. I have three questions. One is I would be really interested to see if it's possible to see kind of average daily dispatch activity, calls and follow up on calls, and I guess just to kind of understand where the demand versus the meeting the demand call wise. I see there's totals, but and then the other thing I wanted to know is where training is in this chart and what line item.
So Lauren, can you help me? Is it under M&S or is it under personnel?
It's under personnel.
Okay.
So when I talked about consolidating these funds, the public safety, library, and parks and rec and planning funds into the general fund, this is one of the things that I think will be of interest to the whole entire committee and transparency for the whole entire city. In these funds that are outside the general fund, the requirement and actually standard is that mandatory standard that we use personnel services, materials and services, transfers, capital outlay, debt service as a total. Whereas if I were to move this fund into the general fund, you would see more of a breakout like you did in those other general fund departments where it shows personnel related expenses and salaries and benefits and other items like that. And I actually misspoke. I said it was in personnel, but it actually is in materials and services. I'm sorry for that. And so we currently have for training, let me pull up my we have about 50,000 a year for training of all the officers in our budget.
Okay, thank you. And I know that there's been discussions about posting training publicly where people can see what training is happening, and has that is going to happen, or?
It's on the website. It's been on the website for about a month now. If you go under police, I don't want to change my screen, but it's on our website. If you go to the city website, click police, one of the bars on the left, where it has the different departments, one of them is just training, and it lists all the training that we did, I believe, last year, and what we have, what we're going to do this year. If we have a specific date identified, then that's in there. If there's not a specific date, it's because we haven't narrowed down the date from the instructor yet. we want to project those out 2 years in advance. But like, you can't get an instructor to commit 2 years out to something, but the basic things like implicit bias, stuff like that, those will be on there. And then to go back to your other question about calls for service, the metrics on page 61, it has it doesn't break it down, but it breaks down priority 1s and 2s, and then it breaks down 3s and all other calls that we do. There's 21,000 calls that the city handled in 19. I wouldn't go by the data on 2020 just because COVID threw a wrench into everything, and calls for service actually went down tremendously on that. So,
right, and that's a year total, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, I just have one more quick question, and I'm afraid it's back to municipal court, and so maybe Lauren could help me with that.
Absolutely.
I have heard some discussions around making the system more equitable, around lowering fines, and I just wondered if that, looking at this, I don't know how they would how our fines scale compares to other cities, but has that been discussed or addressed, or would that be appropriate?
So I believe that these fines are state mandated fines. Is that correct, Peter? Yeah, so these are fines that we get from the state schedule. They increase annually. They're in our master fees and charges, and they are passed through or passed down to us from the state, and that's the changes that we make. We don't make these up ourselves.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mayor Walters.
Chair. First I want to just say to Abby that the FBI has some good research on number of officers per capita. And so I can send a link to everybody for that so that they can take a look. And we are actually pretty much, if I remember correctly, pretty much in line with similar cities. So, but the other piece comes back to the body cameras. And I don't think I didn't hear Lauren as well as I wanted to. So, of course, first of all, I thought we had body worn cameras in the budget all along. We had sort of decided that that was something the council was interested in. But now but of course we knew it was going to be expensive and that retention was going to be the expensive part. Are we able to do that or not able to do that?
Absolutely. If that's the council and budget committee's direction, we can add that in here. Just know that our $2.3 million deficit for the next year's budget will be increased by about a little under 200,000. So it will be about $2.5 million deficit. Okay. Unless there are other areas that are decreased, which hopefully, like I said before, we won't have that much of a deficit at the end of this biennium.
And Chief, were there any places that you were able to, I know everything is running lean, but were there spots where you thought you could move some funds to help acquire and retain body-worn cameras and their footage?
The first part that was cut off, was that for me, Mayor Walters?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, so we had our 2 pages of specific line items, and we moved everything around that we could. At the time we did that, we didn't have the bids, so I didn't know what number we were targeting to try and get to. But we were falling short. If we need, because there's things we need to do. We need to replace old police cars. We need to do this. We need to do trainings, and we just were not able to find $200,000 within the budget at that time.
And did anybody look for grants or other ways to offset the cost?
We have done a cursory look at grants. There's body-worn cameras is a national push right now, and we're hoping the federal government will step in. So far, they haven't, not yet. There are states that are trying to mandate them, and so there's going to be millions and millions and millions of dollars that are spent on body-worn cameras. But the problem with some kind of a federal grant is the manipulation of the grant itself becomes so cumbersome, and you end up with this property that you have to account for and give back, and it gets harder to administer the grant. We're hoping for maybe some state level grants, but we are looking at the grant options to answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, Councilor Bialostowski.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the presentation. I just had a couple of questions. One, on this data sheet, priority 1 and 2 calls are combined. I was wondering if it's possible to see like the number of priority 1 calls and the number of priority 2 calls separate. Is that something that you could provide? I don't know why they're combined.
So they're combined because that's how LOCOP tracks them, which is that. And so I asked the same question when I got them. I'm like, well, why can't we just separate those out? It would literally take somebody having to go through and physically do that, I'm told. So if we needed it, right, we're looking at 1,500-1,600 data points to figure out which ones are 1s and 2s. LOCOM's not going to do that for us, so we would have to do that ourselves.
Oh, no problem. I just didn't know if it was like something that could be done easily. No, never mind on that. My other question was, I echo Councilor Baumgartner's statement about looking at data, and I was wondering if it might be helpful to see like in a month, a random calendar month, what type of calls are being responded to, just to kind of visualize what it means, because I see the aggregate numbers of 21,000 a year, but I just wonder, what in a month of March, for example, what was the calls that were being taken, how many of each one, et cetera, just for my information going into this process. I don't know how long that would take to get, but it would be helpful for me.
We can totally take a snapshot of a month, and LOCOM we can actually get that data. We break it out by all the different types of calls that are coded by dispatch, and we can break those out for a month for you to look at and say, oh, this month we went to 42 alarm calls, and we went to this many domestics and that kind of stuff. We can provide that snapshot of a month to month if you'd like.
Okay, that would be great. And my last question on a different subject was just, I was wondering, I think it was mentioned earlier that Wilsonville and Happy Valley are contract cities with the Sheriff's Department. And I was wondering, what's the logic of why certain cities or certain neighbors of ours are doing that versus having you still have a police department, but it's with the sheriff. But what's the logic of doing that? Why would the city do that? That might be a difficult question, or one that's hard to answer, but I was just wondering.
The short answer is I don't know why Happy Valley and Wilsonville chose to go that route. I've never asked them that. I mean, I certainly wasn't around when those cities were contracted out. I don't know if they had police departments originally and then they dissolved them and they were absorbed by the county. I don't know. I'm sorry. Probably, I would assume is so that within the state of Oregon, we have over 200 police agencies. Every little city has their own, from one-man departments up to the 1,000-person department in Portland, right? I'm assuming the cities want control over their police departments and the decisions that go into them. And when you contract out, you take a lot of that control and you give it to in this case, Clackamas County, as to how to administer what they're going to do. So the policies are not separate for Wilsonville versus the Clackamas County. They all have one policy. They all operate under the same the collective bargaining agreement and such. So I assume it would be because they don't want to release the influence over the department.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? All right, seeing none. Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the library. And you're still muted. You're still muted. Sorry, Doug, we still can't hear you.
We're gonna have to add a computer upgrade to the budget so that mics work. I hope everybody's that.
Okay, we'll stand by, Doug.
While we're waiting, I want to thank the police chief for making a Johnny Carson reference. I really appreciated that.
Doug, do you want me to skip ahead to the non-departmental while you figure it out, or do you want to shake your head yes if you want me to skip ahead?
Yeah, I think he's
Okay.
okay.
Okay, I'll skip ahead to non-departmental if that works for everyone.
Sure, go ahead.
While Doug figures out his. Non-departmental is on page 56. This is the fund or the department in the general fund that kind of encompasses everything that doesn't really have another place to go. So one of the top line item here is general office supplies and league dues. A majority of that is the League of Oregon City dues for the city, and then general office supplies for the city. The next line item, well, professional and technical services is nothing in it, so we can ignore that line item. The third line item is other neighborhood associations. That's $15,000 a year. That includes the $10,000 stipends to the neighborhood associations and the $5,000 allocated for other services like postcards and any other services to the neighborhood associations. The next item is risk management claims, which is our insurance claims for the general fund or insurance allocation for the general fund. Each fund in the budget has an allocation of a portion of our general liability insurance, and this is one of them. I see that Councilor Jones has a question. Did you want?
Yeah, Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Lauren, do you want questions item by item? Or you want us to just wait to the end?
I'm fine either way. If you want to.
On this particular item, risk management claims, it's over 20% jump. Is that anticipation that rates are going up, or you expect more claims?
It actually, so this line item itself is kind of a two-part line item. So it's self-insurance, and then it's actually like a portion of our premium. Our premiums have skyrocketed over the last few years. Fiscal year 21, our premiums went up about 23%. We have been told by our insurance benefit broker that our insurance rates, our premiums will go up approximately 25% in fiscal year 22 and another 20% in fiscal year 23. So you will see those increases there. And then in addition to some other claims. Yes.
Thank you. Just to note, you said our rates will go up. Is this unique to us, or is this an industry-wide issue?
No, so we're in a pool. CIS has a pool. So there are three factors, as I understand it. Insurance rates or premiums are kind of like credit scores. They're not going to really tell you exactly what goes into the calculation of it, but there are some things that we do know. And the first thing that we know is just the general insurance market nationwide. And nationwide, obviously, with the pandemic and policing situations that have been going on across the country, natural disasters, there's a lot of concern and risk and a lot of loss all nationwide. And then we're in this pool, CIS, in Oregon. So it's an experience modification of how the entire state of Oregon is done. Well, also, the entire state of Oregon has not done well in the last few years because of fires and general police claims, ice storms, you name it. we've had it happen in the last year or two. And then, of course, the city's experience modification, which we also have not done well with in the last few years. So it is, our rate increase is unique to us in the sense that we do get a different one than everyone around us that's also in the pool, but not significantly. We're all in it together. So the first two categories, the how we're doing as a nation or what we're projecting to happen in the future, is one category that we can't control. And then the second category, how Oregon, and everyone in the pool is doing, is another item we can't control. But the thing that we can control is our losses, our actual losses. So the first two determine the rates for everyone, and then each city on their own or jurisdiction gets their own increase. So you will see that across the board in all funds. It's in materials and services for each one of the funds. It is one of the big issues with our structural issue in our funds. Our revenues generally go up to 3 to 5% a year. Our property taxes go up approximately 3% each year. Our utilities and other fines and fees go up about 5% each year. And some of our expenses, like insurance, are going up 25 or 20% a year. Obviously, that doesn't match up, and that's why you'll see the decline in the fund balances over the next few years and the structural issue that we're having. And pretty much every other city around us is having that issue. Are we all great on insurance risk management? Okay. The next line item is emergency utility assistance. This line item is put in at $6,000 a year. It is for exactly what it's called, emergency assistance for utility customers. It's a one-time thing for a utility customer if they're in a very challenging situation. They lost their job, they had a family member who was supporting them to pass away, something that is an extension, like a large situation that they can't control, and they are not able to pay their utility bill. We will work with them to either write off a portion of their utility bill or all of their utility bill, or make a payment plan arrangement where we write off portions when they pay. So we have a $6,000 budget for that each year. The council discussed last year if there was a need for more due to COVID, that they would be willing to talk about increasing that. We haven't seen a significant uptick. I mean, we have seen a little bit of an uptick, but not anything that warrants going back to council to ask for more money in that area at this point. Under other miscellaneous, I have that as number item 6. That is a few different items. Our bank charges for the general fund, our procurement program, miscellaneous items like consultants or sustainability that don't have anywhere that they're specifically under. It's about $16,000 in the first year. So not a significant expense there. Other Willamette Falls Heritage Area Coalition, we've been supporting them about $15,000 each year and have continued that in this budget process. The next line item is community grants. We have that budgeted at $25,000. That's continuing the same amount from the prior years. Grants to Main Street, we have that in the budget at $20,000. As you know, Rebecca came to the beginning of the meeting and asked for a little bit more, about $31,000 more. That is not in the budget. The American Rescue Plan, this is where we've put the total expenditure of the $5.4 million. This is unlikely that we're going to spend this all in this area. It is more of just a placeholder so that you can see the revenue coming in and the expenditure going out. We're hoping that this helps fill some gaps in some other funds and some other departments and helps pay for other areas that will help reduce the deficit in the fund balance again.
Councilor Jones, do you have a question?
Thank you, Chair. Lauren, do we also provide a grant to the Westland Chamber of Commerce? And if so, where's that in the budget?
We do not.
Thank you.
The last item on here is the backyard habitat certification. And that's budgeted at 15,000 for the biennium. The next area down is our debt service on our full faith and credit obligations. That is what we're required. And as you can see, there's also a portion down at the bottom, which is new this biennium for lease principal and interest. And that's on those leases that you'll see the actual expenses of the lease payments. Transfers to other funds. These are transfers to help supplement other funds that are not meeting their reserves. This is part of what makes having these extra funds a little bit confusing because they're transferring money to the general fund for covering of indirect costs, and then we're transferring money back out to cover those funds to make sure that they meet the reserves. So that's where those line items come from, and then just the non-departmental total and our reserve amounts. Are there any other questions on non-departmental?
I don't see any. Oh, Councillor Baumgartner.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I was just looking at the Main Street handout, but back to the Main Street, how much did you say they were asking for?
They're asking for 31,000 and some change, 31,240, I want to say. I'm not exactly sure the amount.
And currently it's 20.
Currently it's 20.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Abby?
Thank you very much. Lauren, our contingency forecasts, not so much the ones we have right now, were those in, first of all, are the amounts set by organ, or is there an organization that says these are the good amounts to keep?
Right. So we have reserve requirements for our financial policy. We follow GFOA's best practice, which says, let me just make sure. Yeah, it says you should keep about 2 months, which is about 16.67% in your reserve balance at the end of the year. We have it at 15%. Basically what this is and 5% of that is in the unappropriated ending fund balance, and 10% of that is in the contingency. Basically, what we need that extra money for is, of course, contingency, emergency situations. We've seen it all this year, so it is a really good thing to have that 15% in there. But also, because we don't get our property taxes until late November, that money helps carry forward those first few months of the year and make sure that we're able to meet all of our requirements, our debt requirements, pay our staff, and pay our materials and services contract for the first portion of the year. Welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Lauren. Let's backtrack now to library and Doug.
All right, can you hear me now? Okay.
Sure.
Sorry about that. My apologies. Thank you. The Budget Committee and Council, I'll try to be quick. I think the first thing I want to point out is if you look on page 18 and you look at our service comparisons with other cities, and you'll see that the library is functioning at a 15.71 FTE, which is the lowest in our area compared to Milwaukee, Oregon City, Wilsonville, Taggart, and Lake Oswego. So we'd like to think you're all getting a good bang for your buck at the library as everyone's working extra hard to try to make sure that we can get through the things that need to happen to keep the community going in a way that a library can. The second thing I'd like to point out is we've been this last year in a pandemic, and with the number one place probably that people go in the city that is a city facility is probably your library, since we don't have counters at the parks. I can say that safely. We've obviously not been able to have people in the building for 14 months. The next thing I'd like to draw your attention to is the fact that we've had projecting and will have over 500 programs. That means 500 programs that we have put on virtually for our community. during the same time. So that's a big kudos to the staff that's gone out and doing that and making that transition from a library to like a small film studio. I feel like a producer and a director and all these other things. But they've done a wonderful job at trying to reach out to our community. So if you see from the budget, we are down a person from the last two bienniums. We have not we're not going to get a replacement this time. There's other needs at the city at this point, and that's fine. And our budget has pretty much stayed at a small percentage going up for the various things that like inflation and COLAs and other things like that. The three main areas that you have, of course, are your personnel services, which is your largest one, materials and services being secondly. The other one that doesn't show up here that is the money that we receive from our bookstore and from our foundation. We haven't been able to run our bookstore for a year, so we haven't been able to receive funds from them, which traditionally go for our programs and also for the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, which we have the largest in the quickest amount of time, the largest amount of people joining that with over 450 children across the city that are under the age of 5 that receive a book every month, in their name from birth to 5 years old. And that costs us the foundation $25 per child per year, which is subsidized by the Dollywood Foundation by about half. So it's a really great program. Continue to looking to that, and also hopefully maybe looking at maybe some CARES Act funding or ARP funding for that, which is being used in some other areas in the country. The library's still been very well used. When we were doing our programs, we were having people picking up their materials and watching the programs online. We had over 20,000 curbside in about 8 months, which was getting people's stuff gathered, bringing them to their vehicles at certain times when they made appointments. Now we're open to the public inside to pick up those materials. And I'd like to be able to tell you what the library is going to look like a year from now, but I'm not going to because I don't know. What I think it's going to be is continue to be a hybrid of what we've seen during this pandemic. And we'll probably see new trends and new ideas. We are going to be putting in this year a similar to what you see those Amazon smart lockers, where people will be able to go and pick up the items if they choose to at any time during the day or night at the library outside in a lit and video recorded area, which also helps with equity in our communities for those that can't make it to the library. We'll continue to want to do lots of good programming, working on, again, adapting to our underrepresented voices in our community, working extensively with all of our partners, including the food bank, but probably our biggest partner is the school district, and working with them and the needs that they might have and how we can supplement that with our programs at the library. So I know it's late. I'll take questions, and thank you for your good time and everything.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions? I see Mayor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you so much, Doug. You guys have been doing amazing work forever, and especially during this pandemic. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm wondering if you feel like you need more money in this budget to supplement the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, or if you think the foundation can handle it, or are there ways that we can support the foundation in that? Just curious.
Sure. I think in years past, we've gone for a community grant that the foundation didn't go for one this last year. And the budget committee's always been very wonderful at providing some resources for that. We had 2 years of revenue saved. We have about 1 year of revenue saved now. So I think, maybe a combination of the two. Fundraising can be challenging, but I know that there's some people that have some good ideas about how we can do it through this pandemic. I think the community is very receptive to Dolly Parton and really want it, and that reflects by how many children they have signed up for it. And this is a community that has some capacity and willing to give. So at this point, I think it's just still wait and see. I don't want to ask for something that we don't necessarily need at this point, but I also just want to be aware that it's a very successful operation that we run with the Dolly Parton Imagination Library, and it's probably one of the most equitable things that we can do in our community from an equity lens as well.
On another note for that, sorry to step in, but There is, you can see that our fines and fees, we didn't have any for the last year. And we're not really expecting a lot for the following year. That's obviously due to COVID. One of the areas of the American Rescue Plan is that we can use it for revenue replacement. There's a formula that needs to be done to calculate that, but I'm really hopeful that although we didn't budget for it in this area, that we can allocate some of the revenue from the ARP to the library fund that would help make up for that revenue loss that they've seen due to COVID.
Great.
Just another side note.
Yep. Any other questions? Councilor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to note that the sun never sets on the Westland Library.
Thank you, Councilor Jones. Appreciate that.
I think he's also referring to the picture behind you. Abby Farber.
Just, you know, I can't think anything that makes me happier than that library. And I had a question. I know Canopy, which is a great service for those of you who don't know it, the streaming, especially the Criterion Collection stuff on there. Have you found good participation? I know it must cost us something.
Yes, yes, that is one of the great things about that Criterion, the collection is part of Canopy, and they're ever adding more films to that. Yes, we limit it right now to 5 per card holder, 5 downloads, if you will. Once you download it, you have about 24 hours, I believe, to watch the film in its entirety. And it is being used, and they continue as it's getting used more as they add more materials to it and more people find out about it. So we have been, you know, putting a lot of our funding into more into online materials, but I don't want to say I'm skeptical, but we did a survey before the pandemic, about 18 months before the pandemic, and it came out 97% of our community wanted physical materials. 97%. It means they still wanted the other things too, but the thing they cherished the most was the books, the DVDs, the audio books, the things that they were able to, the makers materials, take and makes, and also our library of things. So I hesitate to put all of our eggs in the e-content, but we have done a lot more. And, you know, we just added the New York Times in the last few months for everybody in the city. So you can download and read the New York Times as part of your subscription. And there's other things as well. So we continue to want to support those things, and we'll will support those things because the community does use them. We'd like to be able to add more downloads per month for everybody. But at this point, we're just at 5.
Right. And does getting ebooks from, there's like the Clackamas County, you know, ebooks, which I've been using a lot. And does that cost us anything to be part of that?
Yes, we do contribute to that, to our e-content through the Cloud Library and through Overdrive, which are the 2 main areas where we have for content for books and materials. So yes, it does, and it's ever increasing. And of course, it's also a holds ratio as well, just like there is on the physical materials. So we try to keep it in a place that, you know, we can keep it going and people can see it and have access to the materials in a somewhat timely manner. But yeah, it's always an effort.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Doug. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
We will move on to debt service fund. Sounds thrilling.
It's very thrilling, and it's the last one of the night, so I'll make it as short and sweet as I possibly can. Our debt service fund is the fund that accounts for our general obligation debt. We've had a few of those retire over the last couple of years, and so now we only currently have 2 GO debts. Those are the 2012 GO for the police station and the 2018 for the city facilities, parks, and transportation bond. And we receive property taxes into this fund, as you all know from your property tax statements, specifically for the debt service of these GO bonds. That's pretty much the extent of that. I will welcome questions if there are any on that.
Any questions, Lauren?
Just a quickie on the 2 bond funds. When are those going to be retired? What the active ones? What are their retirement dates?
So they're 20-year obligations. So the 2012 will be 2032 and the 2018 will be 2038.
Any other questions? I don't see any, Lauren. I think we finished our agenda items as far as the budget presentations. Is there anything else we need to do, Lauren, as far as that goes?
No, I think we'll just need to announce the next 3 if needed. I am thinking that the next, if not the next one, will definitely be finished. I'm thinking by next Monday, but we do have to announce the next 3 for budget law purposes.
Okay, certainly. So I will announce that we have 3 scheduled upcoming meetings of the Budget Committee. This coming Wednesday, May 19th at 6 o'clock via WebEx. Next Monday, May 24th at 6 p.m. via WebEx. And then if necessary, Wednesday, May 26th at 6 p.m. via WebEx.
Right. And I think, like I said, I think that Monday one will be as necessary too, or if needed as also. We do have a lot to go over on Wednesday night, but depending on how quickly the questions go, we might get to the point of approval on Wednesday night, or we might move more information to the following Monday for more meeting.
Okay, sounds good.
And if
anything else? I'm sorry, go ahead,
of
Lauren.
course, if there are any questions in the meantime before Wednesday, please reach out to myself, Jerry, John. We are happy to answer any questions before Wednesday and make life easier for Wednesday night.
Okay, Ann Fraser.
Just a real quick question. I have downloaded the agenda for the Wednesday meeting. Now, is that also the agenda that covers the other 2 meetings?
Yes. So what that is that's kind of like an ongoing meeting. It is, we will get through as much as we get through on Wednesday night. And if we're done, we're done. And if we have 2 items left on the agenda, then we'll move to the following Monday.
Okay.
And it just kind of depends on if everyone wants to work later on Wednesday night, or obviously if we have a lot left to do, then we'll move it to Monday.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, any other last comments? Last chance. Abby, real quick.
I just want to thank the city staff, especially the finance team and the city manager, really all of them for, wow, they put a huge amount of work into this budget document, and it's clear they understand their programs and where the funding is coming from. This was really, really impressive. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate that.
Yeah. Ann Fraser.
I just would like to give a vote of thanks to you, Ed, for running the meeting. I think you did a very good job